Chapter 789. Dragon Soul. Qin Yu thought as he looked at Nangong backing, who was attacking madly outside the battle god array. Reverse time, double space time. Immediately, the dragon soul in the divine dragon ancient seal formed a seal with its hands and performed a divine ability. In an instant, the space outside the battle god array became distorted and blurred as if space was in turmoil. Secret spatial technique? Nangong backing, who was attacking madly, sensed it immediately. Nangong backing squinted his eyes and prepared to cast a secret technique to stabilize the void. However, a mysterious force suddenly surged out. This is the power of time? Space-time divine ability? Nangong backing's expression changed drastically. He immediately retreated as if he had seen a ghost, because the flowing mysterious energy was shockingly the energy of time. Even though Nangong backing's cultivation had reached the limit of the heavenly ethereal stage, he still did not dare to touch the power of time. In the past, there was an ancient almighty in the void zone who could control the power of time. In a single night, he had caused an ancient divine clan to disappear from the world. That was because that ancient almighty had directly caused the time of the ancient divine race to pass by hundreds of millions of years overnight. Even heavenly ascension realm existences who were strong enough to be titled as emperors could not live for billions of years. Where did this person come from? Nangong backing's face turned ugly. Gu Wudi was probably not useful now that he was entangled by the ancient divine ability. Now the battle god race had the upper hand. In a short period of time, another heavenly ethereal stage existence had fallen. As for the heavenly gods who had formed the battle god array, more than 100 of them had died. The power of the 10 ancient divine battle spirits was too terrifying. Suppress. At this moment, Zhan Wuqiang had already fixed his eyes on Nangong backing. He immediately brought the battle god seal with him and charged towards Nangong backing. As promised, Qin Yu had already entangled Gu Wudi, who was second only to Nangong backing. Zhan Wuqiang naturally would not allow Nangong backing to interfere with Qin Yu. Sacred refining spirit art. Nangong backing's face twitched as he exuded an earth-shaking qi. Like a god of death, he fought against Zhan Wuqiang head-on. Both of them were boiling with murderous intent. They attacked with all their might, wanting to kill each other. The heaven and earth yuan qi that was as vast as the sea filled the entire sky. It was like a 10,000-year-old volcano erupting, and it destroyed everything within a radius of thousands of kilometers. Even heavenly ethereal realm cultivators did not dare to step into the area affected by the great battle. Nangong backing's combat strength was indeed terrifying. This could be seen from the fact that he could fight against Zhan Wuqiang, who had the battle heavenly seal with his bare hands. However, Zhan Wuqiang's goal was not to kill Nangong backing. As long as he could stall Nangong backing, the 10 ancient battle spirits would be able to wipe out the upper echelons of the War God Hall. At that time, Nangong backing would not be able to do anything alone. Zhan Wuqiang and the other 10 fighting spirits would definitely be able to deal with Nangong backing. Nangong backing naturally knew that this was the reason why he had attacked Qin Yu, to save Gu Wudi. Unfortunately, Qin Yu's strength surpassed Nangong backing's imagination and caused his plan to fail. He could only look on helplessly as the core battle power of the War God Temple fell one after another. Who are you? I have been in the Void Zone for so many years, but I have never heard of someone like you. In the battle heavenly divine formation, Gu Wudi, who had not taken Qin Yu seriously, had a grave expression on his face. His eyes were filled with dread. This was because Gu Wudi had discovered that Qin Yu had mastered the power of space-time. If Qin Yu had only reached the complete heavenly ethereal realm with the help of the divine formation, Gu Wudi would not have been afraid at all. He had suppressed a complete heavenly ethereal realm cultivator before. However, if Gu Wudi had the battle strength of a complete heavenly ethereal realm expert and mastered the space-time mystique, it would not be as simple as 1 + 1. After separating Gu Wudi with the space-time mystique, Qin Yu was not in a hurry to attack. You are Zhan Wuji's disciple. Why did you betray the war tribe? Strictly speaking, the outcome of this battle was not very important. After all, the core forces of both sides were Zhang Wuqiong and Nangong backing. Only Zhang Wuqiong and Nangong backing's life and death would determine the direction of the battle. Therefore, Qin did not bother to fight Gu Wudi to the death. Gu Wudi's eyes flashed with a strange light. He sized up Qin Yu and asked instead of answering, "You are not a member of the war tribe. Why did you get yourself involved in this trouble?" "How should I put it? Because Zhang Wuji and the Yin Yang god took care of me, I decided to help the war tribe," Qin Yu said indifferently. "You have met Master and Martial Ancestor?" Gu Wudi was stunned. Many people in the Void Domain knew Zhang Wuji's real name, but very few knew about the Yin Yang god. Even back in the Palace of War, only Gu Wudi and his disciples knew about the Yin Yang god. Apart from them, even the direct descendants of the war tribe had never met the Yin Yang god. How did Qin Yu know about his martial ancestor? Could it be that Qin Yu had really been taken care of by Master and Martial Ancestor? Zhang Wuji and the Yin Yang god did not hesitate to sacrifice their lives to protect the Void Domain. They risked their lives to suppress the Sky Devils. However, as his disciples, not only did you fail to protect his descendants, you even took away their rightful position in the name of righteousness. Tell me, if Zhang Wuji were to find out about this, how would he feel? Qin Yu said with a smile. His tone was filled with ridicule. The main reason the war tribe had fallen in recent years was that Zhang Wuji had used a forbidden art to deal with the Sky Devils, which had sealed their bloodline. This was also the reason why Zhang Wuji had left behind his bloodline and other legacies before he passed away. Gu Wudi's face twitched upon hearing this. His eyes were filled with guilt, regret, and other complicated emotions. He now believed that Qin Yu might have met his master. After all the races in the Void Domain, including the war tribe, only knew that Zhang Wuji had suddenly disappeared. However, Gu Wudi and Nangong backing knew that Zhang Wuji had led his disciples to fight the Sky Devils. Back then, they had only stayed because they were too weak. However, none of the senior brothers and sisters who had followed Zhang Wuji had returned. Since Qin Yu knew about this, he must know the inside story. After a moment of silence, Gu Wudi said in a hoarse voice, "It has already happened. Do you still expect me to atone for my sins?" Although he had not slaughtered the war tribe during the Civil War, Nangong backing had been able to divide the Palace of War because he had stood on Nangong Baiqing's side. Thus, the blood grudge of the war clan's people was something he had to shoulder as well. There was no way he could escape responsibility. "Since you chose to stand by and do nothing back then, I'll stand by and do nothing today. Take it as an eye for an eye. Of course, you can't leave before the battle outside ends." Qin Yu looked at the War God Temple and the war tribe that were fighting fiercely. His calm voice was filled with unquestionable confidence. Chapter 790. With the help of the heaven-battling divine array and the space-time mystique, Qin Yu's battle strength was comparable to Gu Wudi's. It was impossible for Gu Wudi to break out of the divine array in a short period of time. In fact, if Qin Yu had truly wanted to kill Gu Wudi, whether or not Gu Wudi would be able to survive today was another matter altogether. Qin Yu had only used the heaven-battling divine array and the space-time mystique. He had not used any of his other trump cards yet. Gu Wudi looked solemn as he stared at Qin Yu. Judging from the current situation, Qin Yu was not exaggerating. With the space-time mystique and the heaven-battling divine array, even if Gu Wudi risked his life, he would not be able to break the array in a short period of time. Qin Yu looked at Gu Wudi, who was not moving, and then looked at the battle between Zhang Wuqiong and Gu Wudi. Although he and Gu Wudi were in the heaven-battling divine array and were very close to each other, the space between them was filled with space-time energy. As long as Gu Wudi made the slightest move, Qin Yu would be able to react in an instant and separate Gu Wudi. Gu Wudi seemed to be aware of his own situation and did not attack anymore. He looked at the battle outside. At this moment, the battle between the war tribe and the war god hall had reached its climax. All kinds of secret skills and killing moves filled the area. Heavenly origin energy was like a vast ocean. However, With the help of the 10 ancient war spirits, the war tribe experts had gained the upper hand. 7 heavenly ethereal realm experts of the war god hall had already fallen. The other heavenly gods had also suffered heavy losses. The smell of blood filled the air. Nangong Backing, who was fighting with Zhang Wuqiong, felt the continuous deaths of the war tribe experts. His face turned pale and his heart bled. Those heavenly god realm and heavenly ethereal realm elders had been cultivated by him for hundreds of years. In the end, they were easily killed. Boom! After Nangong Backing and Zhang Wuqiong exchanged a blow in the air, they were both sent flying. The energy fluctuations on their bodies were chaotic, as if they had suffered a heavy backlash. Today, not a single one of you from the war clan should think about leaving here alive. This time around, Nangong Backing did not take the initiative to rush out. After the previous battle, he could tell that it would be difficult for him to suppress Zhang Wuqiong, who had the heaven battling seal. Because of that, an incomparably ruthless expression appeared in Nangong Backing's eyes. His hands began to form hand seals, and a special destructive ripple was emitted. They could faintly see strange dark runes appearing on Nangong Backing's skin, which spread across his entire body, causing his aura to change tremendously. What power is this? Zhang Wuqiong, who was about to take the opportunity to attack Nangong Backing, stopped abruptly. Nangong Backing's aura was too dangerous. Even with the heaven battling seal, Zhang Wuqiong did not dare to act rashly. Is that the sky demon's aura? Qin Yu, who was holding Gu Wudi back within the heaven battling divine matrix, was visibly moved. He could sense that the strange dark runes on Nangong Backing's body were the aura of the Sky Demon clan that he had sensed in the Holy World. Zhan Wuji and the Yin Yang god had sacrificed their lives to suppress the invading Sky Demon clan. Zhan Wuji did not even have the chance to enter the reincarnation cycle. As Zhan Wudi's disciple, Nangong Backing was actually in cahoots with the Sky Demon clan. Demon Chaos. Nangong Backing roared furiously as his body emitted millions of rays of dark light. It was filled with an evil aura, as if an ancient demon was about to be born. At that moment, the chaotic battlefield fell silent. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines as they turned their heads to look at Nangong Backing. Even the 10 ancient war spirits stopped as they looked at Nangong Backing with eyes that flickered with spiritual light. Unparalleled battle aura surged out. Sizzle, sizzle. A few war god hall experts who were approaching Nangong Backing were directly crushed by the demon light. The terrifying aura was like the descent of an ancient demon god. Not good. Retreat. Zhan Wuqiong roared furiously as he sensed the terrifying demon light on Nangong Backing's body. He ordered the war tribe members to retreat. What is that? The Temple Master is even killing his own people? Run. The Temple Master has not fully mastered this demon Dao secret skill. Once he gets involved, he will definitely die. The expressions of the War God Hall experts changed drastically. They could not care less about fighting with the war tribe members as they frantically retreated. They felt as if their souls were about to leave their bodies. The war tribe members also sensed the danger and quickly retreated from Nangong Backing. Even so, many of them were pierced by the demon light and died. Patriarch, what kind of superpower is that? The war tribe heavenly ethereal realm experts gathered around Zhan Wuqiong and asked solemnly. They could sense an extremely terrifying destructive aura from Zhan Wuqiong's body. The destructive aura was so terrifying that it made their souls tremble. They could not bring themselves to fight. At this moment, even if they had the help of the 10 war spirits, they would not be able to defeat Nangong Backing. This seems to be the demon Dao aura. Could it be that Nangong Backing has entered the demon Dao? Zhan Wuqiong's face was solemn, and he felt a sense of danger. I have already said that none of you will live today. Ancient demon boundary. Nangong Backing, who was surrounded by eerie black Dao inscriptions, shouted as his eyes turned red. He looked ferociously at Zhan Wuqiong and the others. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a deafening explosion sounded in the area. It was as if thunder had exploded. Immediately after, the War Tribe and the War God Hall members realized that the space within a 1,000-mile radius had become as clear as a mirror. Soon, some of them reacted and their faces changed drastically. That was because, at this moment, the entire region was sealed by an incomparably frightening spirit formation. Everyone was like a bird in a cage, completely trapped. Not only the martial artists of the two superpowers, but even the experts of the superpowers that were close to them were trapped in the boundary, and they could not escape. Demonic spirit. Immediately after, Nangong backing formed a seal with his hands and roared at the sky. His voice shook the 9 heavens. One could clearly see the black Dao inscriptions on Nangong backing's body twisting crazily. Demonic chi surged out and surged into the sky. In the blink of an eye, half of the area behind Nangong backing was covered by the black demonic chi. It covered the sky and covered the sun. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Amidst the demonic chi, there were howls and cries that made one's heart palpitate. One could vaguely see a huge and ferocious demonic spirit charging within the demonic chi. It was as if it wanted to break through the boundary between heaven and earth and rush out from another world. Whoosh! A figure flashed, and Qin Yu appeared beside Zhang Wuqiong and the others from the space-time illusory world. Gu Wudi, who was trapped, was naturally freed as well. However, at this moment, Gu Wantian also noticed that something was wrong with Nangong backing. He did not take the opportunity to attack Qin Yu and the others. Instead, he focused on Nangong backing. He could no longer sense Nangong backing's aura from Nangong backing's body. Instead, it was replaced by a strange demonic chi that made his heart palpitate. He has refined the remnant soul of the sky demon race. Right now, he is communicating with the ancient demon power left behind by the sky demon race. Qin Yu had already noticed the change in Nangong backing and transmitted his voice to Zhang Wuqiong and the others. Remnant soul of the sky demon race. Ancient demon power? Although Zhang Wuqing and the others had inherited the legacy of the old ancestor of the war race, they still did not know what the sky demon race was. Little friend, do you have any ideas? Of course, at this moment, they did not have the time to ask about the sky demon race in detail. Right now, they had to think of a way to kill Nangong backing. I will deal with those demonic spirits. You guys work together with the others to kill Nangong backing. Qin Yu said in a deep voice. Those demonic spirits were not easy to deal with. Even with the boost of the heavens battling God formation and the 9 esoteric battle dragon, it was still extremely dangerous. We have to be careful. Zhang Wuqiong nodded his head solemnly. He could also see that the demonic spirits behind Nangong backing were much more dangerous than Nangong backing himself. However, Qin Yu's background was mysterious. Since he had taken the initiative to fight, he should be able to deal with them. As long as they worked together with the 10 war spirits, they would be able to kill Nangong backing. Kill! At this moment, Nangong backing shouted. It was as if there was an earth-shattering battle cry. From a surging demonic chi, huge demonic spirits rushed out. Although those demonic spirits also gave off a strong aura of the sky demon race, they were different from the sky demon race that Qin Yu had seen before. Strictly speaking, these demonic spirits were the sky demon race that had died in the past. They had borrowed the power of the ancient demon to be reborn. Roar! Qin Yu leaped into the air and pounced forward. As he rushed out, a dragon roar resounded from his body and a mighty dragon aura swept out. Numerous deep cyan-colored dragon scales appeared on Qin Yu's skin. Exquisite and beautiful dragon markings appeared on each of the dragon scales. They were sparkling and translucent. At this moment, Qin Yu's aura skyrocketed at an extremely shocking speed. Furthermore, during this sort of sudden increase in power, Qin Yu, who had dragon scales all over his body, had completely fused with the heaven-battling divine formation. Or it could be said that Qin Yu had directly devoured the heaven-battling divine formation and fused the two into one. The dragon race? Gu Wudi, who was standing at the side, was shocked when he saw Qin Yu's mighty dragon aura. The dragon race had been extinct in the Void Zone for countless years. He had not expected Chinyu to be a member of the dragon race. No wonder his cultivation base was so weak, but his battle prowess was so terrifying. Rumble. While Gu Wudi and the others were still in shock, Chinyu clashed with the ferocious demonic spirits head-on. The two of them exploded with destructive power, and more than half of the boundary space shook violently. Devour. Chinyu struck out with his palm, and the heaven-devouring dragon seal turned into a pitch-black vortex that was dozens of meters wide. It was unfathomable and directly devoured a demonic spirit. When Nangong backing saw Chinyu's actions, a cold smile appeared on his face. You're courting death. Although those demonic spirits were not true heavenly demons, they contained the will of the heavenly demons. They cannot be killed, nor could they be destroyed. Chinyu wanted to use such a simple method to deal with the demonic spirits. That was a complete fool's dream. However, to Nangong backing surprise, the demonic spirit that was devoured actually disappeared into the vortex and did not appear again. What's going on? Nangong backing's face stiffened, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Appear! At this moment, Chinyu, who had just devoured a demonic spirit, formed a seal with his hands. Dragon chi surged out of his body, and then several figures appeared. Those silhouettes were exactly the same as Chinyu. They were practically carved from the same mold. There were several tens of them. It was the dragon chi derivation secret skill that Chinyu had created. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After those figures appeared, they immediately rushed towards the demonic spirits. Under the control of Chinyu's main body, the heaven-devouring dragon seal was continuously used. The demonic spirits that rushed out were devoured before they could even fight. Where did this person come from? Nangong backing regained his senses, and a chilling, killing intent appeared in his eyes. One had to know that the demonic spirits that he had summoned were not any weaker than the 10 battle spirits of the war tribe. However, they were all devoured by Chinyu in an instant. Such a method could be said to be extremely strange. Attack! At this moment, Zhan Wuqiong saw Chinyu's strength and immediately shouted. He gathered the heavenly ethereal realm experts of the war tribe and the 10 battle spirits and charged towards Nangong backing from all directions. Die! Nangong backing no longer cared about Chinyu. He opened his hands, and a long spear appeared in his left hand and a battle sword appeared in his right hand. Nangong backing rushed out and waved his long spear and battle sword. Countless strange demonic runes formed and turned into sword chi that shot toward Zhan Wuqiong and the others. In an instant, the two sides clashed, and a violent battle broke out once again. Although it was 1 against 10, Nangong backing was not afraid at all. Compared to before, there was a huge difference between the current him and the previous him. The destructive and evil demonic light shot out in all directions and pierced through the void. It was so powerful that the heavenly ethereal realm elders of the war tribe could not withstand it. Luckily, the 10 battle spirits were assisting them. Otherwise, Zhan Wuqiong and the others would have been defeated long ago. As for Chinyu's side, devil souls were continuously charging out from the surging devil chi. They were endless, as if there was no end to them. It's not that easy to deal with them. Chinyu's eyes narrowed, but he was not surprised. If the Sky Demon tribe could be dealt with so easily, Zhan Wuji and his disciples would not have lost their lives. Seeing that Nangong backing was trapped by Zhan Wuqiong and the others, Chinyu used his clones to resist the demonic spirits, while his body flashed and rushed into the demonic chi. The moment he rushed in, there were billions of screams and howls. It was as if he had fallen into the 9 Serenities hell. There were billions of evil spirits screaming, which made his hair stand on end. However, Chinyu did not react in the slightest. That was because at this moment, a layer of hazy, pitch-black devil light was being emitted from his entire body. This was the power of the ancestor demon statue in Chinyu's body. The demonic spirits that Chinyu had devoured with the sky-devouring dragon seal had not been destroyed. Instead, he had transferred them into the ancestor demon statue. In front of the ancestor demon statue, those demonic spirits could not resist at all and were directly refined. It was a pity that the ancestor demon statue had been refined by the yin-yang divine sovereign and could no longer be activated by the ancient demon power. Otherwise, the demonic spirits and demonic qi would be a great supplement. After going deeper into the demonic qi, you came to the core area where the demonic qi was gushing out. As for the demonic spirits that he encountered along the way, they were all devoured by Yu. At the center of the area, an ancient door with an illusionary appearance could be seen floating in the air. Chapter 791. The surging demonic qi came from the door of the ancient realm. Yu was no stranger to the door of the ancient realm. He had seen it that day in the secret realm. However, it had been summoned by the real heavenly demon clan, and its demonic qi had far surpassed the door of the ancient realm. Break! Without the slightest hesitation, Yu immediately summoned the ancestral devil statue and violently punched out. Immediately, the void boiled like water, and a vacuum passage dozens of feet wide appeared, extending all the way to the door of the ancient realm. There was a loud rumble, and then a violent shock wave swept out like a flash flood or a tsunami. The entire boundary space shook violently. The demonic souls in the surroundings were annihilated by the shock wave before they could even react. Then, with a soft crack, a clear crack appeared on the door of the ancient realm. Yu focused his eyes and knew that his guess was right. This door of the ancient realm was far inferior to the one summoned by the real heavenly demon clan. Yu did not stop, and immediately continued to summon the ancestor demon statue to bombard the door of the ancient realm. In an instant, the void filled with demonic qi turned into a chaotic zone of destruction. All the demonic souls were annihilated, and no one could step in. If not for the ancestor demon statue and the dragon soul's power of time and space, you would not have been able to stay here. As the ancestor demon statue continued to bombard the door of the ancient realm, more and more cracks appeared. The void around the door of the ancient realm shook slightly, as if it would collapse at any moment. Is the door of the ancient realm about to be broken? At this moment, Nangong backing, who had single-handedly fought Wu Qiong, the others, and the 10 ancient battle spirits, suddenly revealed a look of horror on his ferocious face. He could clearly sense that the source of the powerful power in his body, the ancient demon power, was becoming extremely unstable and was even gradually flowing away. Who was that person just now? Nangong backing couldn't help but feel terrified. He hadn't paid much attention to Yu, because he had assumed that Yu would be torn to shreds by the devilish souls inside. But who would have thought that not only was Yu not torn to shreds, but his foundation was also endangered? Nangong backing wanted to turn around and fight back, but Zhan Wuqiong and the others seemed to have noticed it. They quickly activated the 10 ancient battle spirits and surrounded Nangong backing, preventing him from escaping. This caused Nangong backing to become even more terrified. He roared again and again as his battle power soared to the heavens. However, he was still unable to escape from the predicament before him. If this continues, you won't be able to escape calamity. Leave it to me. But at this moment, an old and sinister voice suddenly sounded from within Nangong backing's body. Nangong backing still has a soul in his body. As expected, this power doesn't belong to Nangong backing. Everyone, be careful. That old and sinister voice was not concealed at all. Therefore, even Zhan Wuqiong and the rest could hear it clearly. This caused them to be extremely vigilant. Aren't you afraid that your identity will be exposed if you speak so openly? Nangong backing's face darkened as he pondered over this. Once the ancient demon gate is destroyed, it will be difficult for me to survive. Since that's the case, what's the point of continuing to hide? Of course, if you let me take control of the body and kill all of these people, you won't have to worry about your identity being exposed. That old and sinister voice said. What a nice way to put it. Don't tell me that you want to use this opportunity to control me and turn me into a puppet. Nangong, backing, coldly replied, as if he did not trust that old and sinister voice. If you don't trust me, then there's nothing I can do. At most, we'll die together. That old and sinister voice did not explain and said indifferently, Rumble. At this moment, another earth-shattering explosion sounded out from the chaotic, demonic aura. This time, as the explosion sounded out, the huge demonic souls that were just born within the demonic aura were completely shattered and could not be reborn. Even the demonic aura that was constantly surging was weakened by half. Do you really want to die like this? At this moment, even that old and sinister voice sounded somewhat anxious. I want everyone from the war tribe to be buried here. The corners of Nangong Backing's eyes twitched as a ruthless expression appeared in his eyes. Shortly after, he closed his eyes as the pitch-black, ancient demonic runes on his body emitted a dazzling light. Don't worry, not a single person who knows of my existence will survive. That old and sinister voice became increasingly sinister, causing one's body to feel a chill. Stop him. Hearing Nangong Backing and that old and sinister voice's undisguised words, the expressions of Zhang Wuqiong and the others changed drastically as they immediately attacked with all their might. The 10 ancient battle spirits did not hesitate as they ignited their ancient source energies and charged towards Nangong Backing. Die! Just as all the attacks were about to reach Nangong Backing's body, he suddenly opened his eyes. His originally blood-red eyes had become pitch black, and the whites of his eyes were completely pitch black. They were like a bottomless vortex that could devour one's soul. With a furious roar, a pitch-black light wave swept out in all directions with Nangong Backing as the center. Wherever it passed, all the attacks that were sweeping towards him were annihilated. How could it be? Could it be that he has entered the heavenly palace realm? How could it be? Zhang Wuqiong and the others were shocked and could not hide their shock and fear. In the Void Zone, the Heavenly Palace realm was a supreme existence that was rarely seen in Shenron. For so many years, the Void Zone had been turbulent, the overlords had changed positions, and the great clans had been destroyed. However, the Heavenly Palace realm experts had never appeared. It was as if they had all been silent. Of course, all the forces in the Void Zone knew that there were Heavenly Palace realm experts hidden in the Void Zone. Once they appeared, the situation in the Void Zone would change. It was enough to show how terrifying the combat strength of a Heavenly Palace realm expert was. But now, Nangong Backing, who seemed to be a different person, had the combat strength of a Heavenly Palace realm expert. He could fight against 10 of them alone, and with a roar, he had shattered their attacks. Such terrifying strength was not something a heavenly ethereal realm expert could do. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The 10 ancient fighting spirits seemed to have seen their mortal enemy. They were out of Zhang Wuqiong's control and rushed towards Nangong Backing crazily. Since you're already dead, why do you need to leave behind a remnant soul? Let me free you all. Zhang Wuqiong and the others did not know why the 10 ancient fighting spirits had gone berserk. However, Nangong Backing did not seem to be surprised at all. Instead, he smiled eerily. He took a step into the air and disappeared in an instant. In the next moment, he appeared beside the ancient battle spirit like a ghost. His hands slashed out like 2 sharp blades, faintly tearing apart the void. Immediately, the ancient fighting spirit was shredded into pieces before it could react. It did not have the slightest resistance and disappeared in the blink of an eye. How could it be? Zhang Wuqiong and the others were shocked when they saw the scene. The combat strength of the ancient fighting spirit was enough to fight against a complete heavenly ethereal realm expert. However, it had been shredded into pieces by Nangong Backing, who had changed his personality. When they looked at Nangong Backing, they realized that his 10 fingers were surrounded by black Tao inscriptions. They were exuding an extremely destructive fluctuation that sent chills down their spines. What kind of power was that? Shush! While the people of the war tribe were still in shock, Nangong Backing flashed out again. Every time he flashed, an ancient fighting spirit would be killed. The ancient fighting spirits roared silently, and their fighting spirits surged. However, they were still unable to stop Nangong backing. In just a few breaths, all of them had been killed. After killing the 10 ancient fighting spirits, Nangong backing's black eyes looked at Zhang Wuqiong and the others. His unfathomable black eyes were emotionless. Oh no! Retreat! Zhang Wuqiong felt an unprecedented sense of danger. He immediately shouted and retreated quickly. Poof! However, just as Zhang Wuqiong's voice fell, the sound of flesh being torn apart could be heard. In an instant, Nangong backing had disappeared, and the few grand elders of the war tribe who had gathered around Zhang Wuqiong were all killed. Zhang Wuqiong had barely escaped death with the help of the War Sky Seal. However, he had suffered a huge blow and was sent flying back with blood spurting out of his mouth. He has reached the heavenly, ethereal realm. Zhang Wuqiong could not hide the shock in his eyes. He used the War Sky Seal to protect his body and quickly retreated. Clan leader, Grand Elder. When the people of the war tribe saw the injured Zhang Wuqiong and the Grand Elders that had been killed, they were furious and wanted to go over to help. Kill. However, when the people of the War God Hall saw that Nangong backing had regained his consciousness and suddenly unleashed his power, they immediately charged towards the people of the war tribe to help Nangong backing. Poof, 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 poof. However, no matter if it was the people of the war tribe or the War God Hall, when they came within a few hundred feet of Nangong backing, they all exploded and turned into blood mist. Don't come over! Zhang Wuqiong was heartbroken. He immediately shouted and ordered the people of the war tribe to stay away. Even without Zhang Wuqiong's reminder, the people of the War God Hall and the people of the War God Hall were all scared out of their wits. They all retreated and did not dare to take even half a step closer. It has been a long time since I absorbed such living blood. At this moment, Nangong backing did not chase after Zhang Wuqiong and the others. After all, this area was under his control and no one would be able to escape. Nangong backing opened his arms and closed his eyes. He had a look of enjoyment on his face as he crazily absorbed the blood mist around him. One could clearly feel that as he absorbed the blood mist, Nangong backing's aura was increasing at a crazy speed. Boom! At this moment, a deafening explosion sounded and a terrifying shockwave surged out. The demonic Qi in the area where Qin Yu was standing was swept away. Qin Yu's figure gradually appeared. There was only one ancient door, which was covered in cracks and was about to shatter. In the end, with a loud explosion, the ancient door exploded and turned into specks of light that scattered in all directions. However, what was strange was that Nangong backing, who seemed to be anxious about the ancient door, opened his eyes and looked at it quietly. Other than that, there was nothing strange about him. After destroying the ancient door, Qin Yu also felt Nangong backing's strange gaze and looked over. Heavenly Demon Tribe? With just a glance, Qin Yu frowned. This was because Nangong Tianfeng gave him the feeling that he was facing a member of the Heavenly Demon Tribe. Qin Yu felt that the sense of danger was extremely familiar. It was definitely the aura of the Heavenly Demon Tribe. Has his body been taken over? Qin Yu's eyes flickered, and he quickly reacted. You have the blood of the human race and the dragon race in your body. But what makes me more curious is why you have the aura of our sacred clan. The two looked at each other for a moment. Then, Nangong backing took a step forward and instantly appeared a few dozen feet away from Qin Yu. At this distance, Zhang Wuqiong and the others were frightened. With Nangong backing's frightening and exceptional speed, Nangong backing did not even need an instant to cross the several tens of feet distance between them and kill Qin Yu. However, Qin Yu was still standing in the same place after seeing Nangong backing's speed. The frown on his face had returned to normal, and there was not the slightest change in his expression. I thought that all the heavenly demons who invaded the Void Zone had been killed. I didn't expect that there were still remnant souls left. Qin Yu said indifferently after hearing Nangong backing's words. There was no fear on his face. So, you have seen other heavenly demons? You are making me more and more interested. Nangong backing let out a sinister and strange laugh after he finished speaking. His figure swayed slightly before he directly disappeared. In the next moment, a figure appeared in the void in front of Chinyu without any warning. A palm covered in strange black Dao patterns suddenly grabbed at Chinyu. However, at the moment when Nangong Backing's palm that was emitting a destructive energy fluctuation was about to touch Chinyu, the entire space surrounding Chinyu started to lightly tremble. Immediately, Chinyu saw that the palm that was surrounded by strange pitch-black Dao markings stopped at a distance only a few centimeters away from Chinyu. It was unable to advance any further. No, to be precise, Chinyu stood in the same place and did not move for a moment. However, Nangong Backing, who had attacked Chinyu, was still rushing forward at an extremely fast speed. The two were only a few inches apart. One was motionless like a statue, while the other was rushing forward at lightning speed. What was strange was that Nangong Backing could not cross the distance of a few inches no matter what he did. It was as if there was a chasm between heaven and earth. The power of time? You have comprehended the power of time and space. From the outside, it was an extremely strange scene. However, Nangong Backing reacted immediately, and a look of shock appeared on his face. Such a profound and pure power of time and space. Could Qin, you have already comprehended the rules of time and space? Otherwise, with his mere cultivation of the heavenly venerate realm, even with the help of external forces, it was impossible for him to possess such a mysterious and unfathomable power of time and space. At this moment, Qin had already made his move. In the eyes of the crowd, Qin had only used a simple chop of his hand to effortlessly chop down. However, in the eyes of Nangong Backing, who was close at hand, there were billions of blade lights that turned into a torrent of blade lights that would completely drown him. There was no way for him to escape. This was the power of time and space. Not only did it affect space, but it also greatly affected the flow of time. Divine Demon as one. At this critical moment, Nangong Backing's reaction was not slow at all. He immediately let out a low roar, and a strange black fog emerged from his body, forming a huge two-faced celestial demon Dharma idol. The celestial demon avatar and the millions of blade lights collided in an instant. That enormous and terrifying shockwave swept through the entire world. Many people with weaker cultivations were instantly smashed into pieces. In the next moment, an explosion rang out, and the huge god-demon figure exploded, turning into chaotic and destructive waves that spread out. It really is the power of the divine ancestor. Who are you? Nangong Backing was knocked back by the impact, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, Nangong Backing did not seem to notice that he was injured. He only looked at Chinyu in shock. Although the body he took over was injured, his demonic soul was unharmed. The dragon soul that was helping Chinyu with its space-time divine ability said solemnly. Although the attack just now seemed to have injured Nangong Backing, it did not actually hurt the heavenly demon avatar that had taken over Nangong Backing's body. Now, we can only see if the immortal subduing palace and the immortal refining cauldron can suppress and refine him. Qin, you can naturally see that the heavenly demon avatar's soul was not injured. With a thought, Qin Yu summoned the immortal subduing palace and the immortal refining cauldron to his side. How did these two divine treasures end up in your hands? Nangong Backing was even more shocked when he saw the immortal subduing palace and the immortal refining cauldron appear around Qin Yu. Crack! Qin Yu ignored him and was about to summon the two divine treasures to suppress Nangong Backing. However, at this moment, a crisp tearing sound suddenly rang out in Qin Yu's ears. Then dazzling sunlight shone in. Qin Yu was startled and looked up. He saw a figure easily tear apart the ancient barrier that Nangong Backing had set up and descend from the sky. How is this possible? Nangong Backing hurriedly looked up as well. When he saw that person easily tear apart the barrier and descend, his pitch-black eyes could not help but shrink as he froze on the spot. The person who had arrived was a skinny old man with an ordinary appearance. He did not have the slightest bit of powerful aura on him. as if he was an old man who did not have long to live. However, no one present dared to underestimate the skinny old man. They had personally experienced how terrifying the barrier that Nangong backing had set up was. Even if they worked together, they would not be able to break it. However, it was easily torn apart in the hands of the withered old man. How could someone with such strength be a nobody? A heavenly palace elite has appeared. At this moment, everyone who had witnessed the scene had the same thought. Perhaps only someone who had stepped into the heavenly palace realm could do it so easily. I did not expect that there would still be remnants of the heavenly demon avatar here. After the skinny old man descended, his starry eyes paused on Chinyu for a moment before he looked at Nangong backing and said faintly. Nangong backing's face changed drastically when he heard the skinny old man's words. Although Chinyu's methods had shocked him, that was all. However, this skinny old man, who looked like he could be blown away by a gust of wind, made Nangong backing feel endless fear in his heart. There was no doubt that the skinny old man who had suddenly appeared was definitely a supreme being. It was very likely that he was a supreme being who had stabilized the heavenly reaching emperor realm. Run! Without any hesitation, Nangong backing's body emitted millions of rays of black light, causing the void around him to shake violently. He was preparing to break through the void and escape. The heavenly demon avatar was known to be immortal and indestructible. Even if they had been suppressed for millions of years, they could not be erased. However, in front of a true heavenly reaching Emperor Realm elite, he could not do anything at all. Whoosh! However, at this moment, the skinny old man suddenly struck out with his palm. As his palm struck out, the void trembled, and a tornado appeared out of nowhere. The tornado whistled past, instantly enveloping Nangong backing. Then, as the tornado whistled past, it rapidly shrank until it finally condensed into ropes. The ropes seemed to have a mind of their own. Without waiting for orders, they bound Nangong backing inch by inch, completely sealing him. No matter how Nangong Tianfeng struggled, or how he unsheathed his demonic soul, it was useless. This made Nangong Tianfeng even more terrified. In his eyes, the skinny old man was like the king of hell who controlled the book of life and death. So powerful, he can't be a heavenly reaching emperor realm existence, right? Chinyu and the dragon soul looked at the withered old man who managed to suppress Nangong Tianfeng with a casual wave of his hand. They were incomparably shocked and frightened. The skinny old man's aura was much more terrifying than Zhan Wuji and the Yin-Yang god's aura in the secret realm. Of course, Zhan Wuji and the Yin-Yang god were not at their peak, so it was impossible to know if the skinny old man's cultivation was stronger than Zhan Wuji and his disciples. However, there was one thing that was certain, and it was that the emaciated old man was definitely a supreme almighty. While he was shocked, Chinyu also faintly sensed that the skinny old man's aura was somewhat familiar, as if he had sensed it somewhere before. Chirp, chirp. While Chinyu was pondering, a sharp and clear bird's cry suddenly sounded. Immortal Phoenix? Chinyu quivered and suddenly reacted. He finally knew why the aura of this withered old man gave him a familiar feeling. The skinny old man was emitting the aura of the immortal Phoenix tribe. However, the skinny old man's aura was extremely pure, so pure that it was completely different. Thus, Chinyu did not immediately react. Chirp, chirp. As for the young immortal phoenix that had fallen into a deep slumber after refining the bloodline, it seemed to be extremely excited. It flapped its wings continuously, wanting to fly out from the divine dragon ancient seal. It is indeed here. At this moment, the skinny old man also sensed the fluctuation of the young immortal phoenix. His deep gaze once again landed on Chinyu's body, and a smile appeared on his face. Immediately, the skinny old man casually pointed. Nangong backing, who was bound and sealed, did not even have the slightest reaction before his entire body exploded, and his soul was completely scattered. This scene caused the corners of everyone's eyes to twitch wildly and their hearts to turn cold. Nangong Tianfeng, who was so powerful, had actually been squashed like an ant. The skinny old man's strength was simply too terrifying. After eliminating Nangong backing, the skinny old man took a step forward and directly appeared in front of Qin Yu. The space-time ability surrounding Qin Yu was completely ineffective against the skinny old man. The new book, I Have a Billion Fiend God Inheritances, has been released. Please support it. Chapter 792. The junior of the Immortal Phoenix tribe seems to have received a lot of care from you. The skinny old man was surrounded by the real rules of heaven and earth and ignored the Dragon Soul's space-time superpower. Senior, are you from the Immortal Phoenix tribe? Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul, who were extremely shocked, immediately reacted. The skinny old man's cultivation had definitely reached the heavenly completion realm, which was enough to be titled as an emperor. Moreover, he had come for the young Immortal Phoenix. No wonder the young Immortal Phoenix was so excited. Qin Yu did not hesitate. With an intention of his mind, the infant Immortal Phoenix was summoned. The excited young Immortal Phoenix landed on Qin Yu's shoulder and tilted its head slightly. Its bright eyes sized up the skinny old man, as if to confirm something. It is indeed the royal bloodline. This time, it was the skinny old man's turn to be excited. He could feel the strong bloodline pressure from the young Immortal Phoenix, and his entire body trembled slightly. Since the bloodline has reached the initial stage of atavism, then the natural enemies hidden in the 10 Directions' great world who covet the bloodline of the Immortal Phoenix tribe will definitely not be able to hold back. You should have sensed it too. Follow me back to the Immortal Phoenix ancestral land. With the skinny old man's cultivation, he could definitely take the young Immortal Phoenix away by force. However, at this time, he had a questioning attitude towards the young Immortal Phoenix. Chirp, chirp. Hearing this, the young Immortal Phoenix turned its head to look at Qin Yu and let out a crisp chirp. I don't know what your natural enemies are, so I can't say for sure. Whether I can protect you or not, you can decide for yourself. Qin Yu and the young Immortal Phoenix had a contract, and their minds were connected. Hence, he understood what the young Immortal Phoenix meant. The young Immortal Phoenix looked at Qin Yu with some reluctance. Then, it nodded and flew to the skinny old man's head. Seeing this, the skinny old man's withered face broke into a smile. Rumble. At this time, a huge black hole suddenly appeared in the void. A huge golden claw that was a few hundred feet in size grabbed at the young Immortal Phoenix. You come as you wish. Your dog's nose is really sharp. In that case, stay here. The originally smiling old man's eyes suddenly darkened and a cold light shot out from his body. He pointed at the air and a 5-colored divine light flashed. With a loud chi sound, the gigantic claw, which was several hundred feet in size, was directly penetrated by the 5-colored divine light. The spatial black hole also completely crumbled. Someone is coming from another region? Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul's expressions turned solemn. Although the skinny old man was able to destroy the giant claw with a flick of his finger, it seemed like it was easy for him to do so. However, Qin Yu and Yi Zichen could sense that the ferocious giant claw definitely had a strength close to the heavenly completion stage. Only now did they understand why the infant Immortal Phoenix had fallen into a deep slumber or stayed in the ancient seal of the dragon god ever since it left the seal of the heavenly domain. It seemed like the celestial phoenix baby had sensed something long ago. It's time to go. We'll meet again if fate wills it. The Immortal Phoenix old man waved his hand casually after destroying the ferocious giant claw with a single finger. Chirp, chirp. The Immortal Phoenix baby was reluctant to leave. It flew to Qin Yu's side and intimately rubbed its head against Qin Yu's face. After all, the Immortal Phoenix baby had been by Qin Yu's side ever since it was born. Let's go. Qin Yu smiled and patted the Immortal Phoenix baby, asking it to leave with the Immortal Phoenix old man. The Immortal Phoenix old man nodded at Qin Yu. Then, he rushed into the portal with the Immortal Phoenix baby and disappeared. Following the disappearance of the teleportation array, the enormous pitch-black hole in the sky also disappeared. Heaven and earth regained its stability. It's over. looking at the gradually disappearing barrier. Whether it was the people of the war tribe, the experts of the war god hall, or the besieged forces, they all reacted. Some of the bolder ones immediately flew into the sky and left. Seeing that the crisis had been resolved, the other experts reacted and quickly left. Only the people of the war tribe and the old members of the war tribe who had been summoned stayed where they were. We won. The elders of the war tribe looked at the experts of the war god hall who had run away. After exchanging glances, they were overjoyed and cheered. Although Zhang Wuqiang and the other elders also smiled, there was not much joy on their faces. Although the immortal phoenix old man had appeared in this battle and killed Nangong backing, the war god hall had been disbanded. However, the 3 supreme elders of the war tribe had died, and the rest of the heavenly god realm elders had suffered great losses. Most importantly, the 10 ancient battle spirits in a war god seal had been lost. The strength of the war tribe could be said to have dropped several levels. Fortunately, Xian Danyang and the other old members of the war god hall seemed to have been intimidated by Qin Yu. Not many of them left. This also made Zhang Wuqiang feel slightly relieved. Perhaps he could use Qin Yu's name to do something. After all, the immortal phoenix old man, who could tear heaven and earth apart with a wave of his hand, was at least at the peak of the heavenly palace stage. He might even be a heavenly ascension stage emperor. With Qin Yu's connections, if their war clan was able to rope Qin Yu in, then there would likely be no one in the entire void region that would dare to provoke them. With this thought, Zhang Wuqiang flew to Qin Yu and told him his purpose. Qin Yu did not refuse Zhang Wuqiang's offer to be an elder consultant of the war tribe. It would not cause him any loss. What Qin Yu cared about was the dragon's tomb that Zhang Wuqiang had seen. With Qin Yu's participation, Xian Danyang and the others also swore allegiance to the war tribe. With this, the situation was set. Like tornadoes, the aftermath of the battle swept across the entire void domain at lightning speed. The news of Nangong backing's demonization and the immortal phoenix old man's appearance shook the entire void zone. After all, it had been many years since a heavenly palace stage expert or a heavenly ascension stage emperor had appeared in the void zone. Because of this battle, the war tribe had replaced the war god temple as the overlord of the void zone. Even though the survivors of the war god temple were still lurking in the dark, no one dared to provoke the war tribe. 3 days later, after Zhang Wuqiang settled the affairs of the war tribe, he took Qin Yu to the land of the fallen gods. The land of the fallen gods was a desolate land in the northern part of the void zone. It was said that ancient gods had fought here in the past, which had turned the land hundreds of millions of kilometers around into ruins. No one had survived. This was because the air here was filled with a strong, murderous aura. It was the immortal Tao of slaughter left behind by the supreme experts of the past. Even heavenly ethereal stage experts could be killed if they were careless. There are indeed dragon auras here. Qin Yu and the dragon soul's expressions flickered as soon as they stepped into the land of the fallen gods. They could sense the dragon auras without using any secret magics. However, the dragon auras were very vague. They could sense them, but they could not pinpoint their exact location. It was very mysterious. Chapter 793. It's strange. Could there be a double secret realm here? Qin Yu and the dragon soul searched the land of the fallen gods carefully before reuniting. There are indeed weak spatial fluctuations, but it's hard to find the source. The dragon soul was now more familiar with space-time superpower, but still could not find the source. Qin Yu pondered. Zhang Wuqiang had left, and they had been searching the land of the fallen gods for a few days. Since they could not find the dragon's tomb, there was no need to stay here. Let's go back to the fire domain first. The dragon soul sensed that Qin Yu had the intention to leave. Yes, there's no need to waste time here. Let's go to the fire domain to find the fire emperor's inheritance, and then snatch the ancient leaf fire dragon from the fire god palace. Qin Yu nodded. The two immediately left. Half a month later, Qin Yu and the dragon soul left the void domain and used the yin-yang escape to quietly return to the flame realm. At the fire god palace, the overlord of the fire domain Roar! An earth-shattering dragon roar resounded. Lava boiled in the vast sea of fire, creating waves of fire that were tens of thousands of feet high. A ferocious dragon shadow could be seen rolling in the waves of fire, giving off a violent and ferocious aura. What's going on? Why is the anciently fire dragon so angry? Shui Yu, who was wearing armor and looking mighty in the fire god palace, sensed the anciently fire dragon's anger and could not help but stand up and mumble to himself. Since the two thieves had stolen a lot of Dragon Clan's blood essence, the anciently fire dragon's cultivation had weakened significantly. More importantly, it had lost its natural superpower. Even the ancestral patriarch did not know the reason for it. During this period, the ancient leaf fire dragon had been recuperating in the sea of fire. Why was it so angry today? Puzzled, Shuiyu immediately flew up and headed towards the sea of fire. When he arrived at the sea of fire, there were already many fire god palace experts gathered there. The fire boundary above the sea of fire had already been opened, and it blocked the ancient leaf fire dragon, which was about to break through the air and escape. What's going on? When Shuiyu arrived, he frowned and asked in a deep voice as he looked at the anciently fire dragon that was emitting a berserk aura. Could it be that someone was trying to take advantage of the anciently fire dragon? Vice Palace Master, we don't know what's going on either. The anciently fire dragon suddenly flew into a rage and burned down several elders. It seems like it's going to charge out. An elder of the fire god palace, who was sweating profusely, quickly replied. Shui Yu's frown deepened. He took a step forward and appeared in midair. Opening his right hand, countless ancient raging flame runes spread out and turned into a giant flame net, suppressing the raging anciently fire dragon. Even before the anciently fire dragon's blood essence was taken away, it was only at the heavenly god realm. However, Shuiyu had already stepped into the heavenly empty realm. The moment he made his move, he immediately suppressed the berserk anciently fire dragon. However, the huge dragon eyes of the anciently fire dragon still contained an incomparably wild and violent fury. Shuiyu felt a headache coming on. With the disappearance of its natural superpower, the anciently fire dragon could no longer speak. It was extremely troublesome to communicate with it now. At that moment, a flame suddenly flew out from the depths of the fire god palace and landed in front of Shuiyu. Old ancestor! Shuiyu was shocked. Even the old ancestor was alerted. He did not hesitate and immediately looked at the flame. When he saw the message contained in the flame, Shuiyu's eyes were filled with a bone-chilling killing intent, and a violent aura surrounded him. They dared to come back to the fire domain. The message in the flame was the reason why the anciently fire dragon had gone berserk. The anciently fire dragon had sensed that Qin Yu and Jian Wushuang, who had taken away its origin blood essence, had appeared in the fire domain again. Last time, you were lucky to escape. This time, I won't give you another chance. Immediately, Shuiyu's expression turned cold as he flew toward the main hall of the fire god palace. Not long later, the fire god palace resounded with the ringing of a bell. The experts of the fire god palace were shocked and immediately gathered around it. Then, a series of secret messages were sent out from the fire god palace and disappeared all over the fire domain. In the west of the fire domain, in front of a barren mountain range, Qin Yu and the dragon soul flew through the air and carefully searched the barren mountain range. Back then, the fire river of the fire spirit tribe had shown them a map of this place. Although the map had disappeared after 49 days, Qin Yu and Jian Wushuang's cultivation level had left a deep impression on them. However, after searching the mountain range for a few rounds, they did not see the divine tower that contained the Fire Emperor's inheritance. Could we have found the wrong place? The dragon's soul looked at Qin Yu. He had even used a space-time superpower, but he did not find anything. It should be here. Qin Yu sensed the faint flame mark in his dantian. It should not be here. It seemed like there was a secret in this place. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Suddenly, Qin Yu and the dragon soul moved slightly and immediately hid. It didn't take long for several figures to shoot over from the distant horizon. Those people were all wearing sky blue robes with a symbol of a cold sword on their backs. Obviously, they were from the same force. However, what caught Qin Yu and Jian Wushuang's attention was that these people's cultivation level had reached the peak of the heavenly god realm. The one-eyed man in the lead was even at the heavenly ethereal realm. Such a force was definitely an overlord force in the fire domain. With so many experts gathered, Qin Yu and Jian Wushuang were even more certain that the Fire Emperor's inheritance was most likely here. After those people arrived, they immediately separated into 3 groups and set up the 7-star ancient array. Then, a strange scene appeared. After ripples appeared in the sky, the color of the entire sky gradually faded, revealing a brand new mountain range. In the mountain range, there was pure spiritual chi of heaven and earth surging. It was like a paradise on earth. It was a completely different scene from the bare mountain range before. That's the ancient divine array, the sky covering sun-changing formation. Qin Yu immediately recognized it. No wonder they couldn't find it. Originally, it was those people who used the sky-covering sun-changing formation to completely change the appearance of the entire mountain range. After realizing this, Qin Yu did not continue to hide. He took out the yin-yang escape talisman and hid in the void, sneaking into the ancient array. After entering the sky-covering sun-changing formation, Qin Yu glanced at the mountain range and saw the divine tower floating in the air. The divine tower was at least 1,000 feet tall and towered into the clouds. It was surrounded by flaming divine runes and emitted an endless emperor's aura. It was like a supreme ancient emperor looking down on the heavens. After seeing the divine tower, Qin Yu's eyes shone brightly. Sure enough, the Fire Emperor's inheritance was here. Of course, looking at those people in sky blue robes, it was obvious that they had discovered the divine tower long ago. He just didn't know if they had obtained the Fire Emperor's inheritance. Chapter 794. When Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul sneaked into the sky, shrouding sun, changing formation, and looked at the divine pagoda. Outside the divine pagoda, 20 to 30 figures with shocking auras were carefully setting up the formation. The 3 people in the lead were a one-eyed man, an old man, and a young man. The one-eyed man was in the middle position and was obviously the leader of the 3. The old man looked wrinkled and lethargic. There was no sign of life in him at all, as if he could die at any moment. The young man was too young, and his face was red and full of vitality. When the 2 stood together, it gave people a strong sense of contradiction. It looks like we'll be able to completely break the restriction of the divine pagoda in half a year. The wrinkled and lethargic Gu Tianqian looked at the progress of breaking the restriction with a smile on his face. His turbid eyes were also filled with excitement. After all, they were breaking a treasure land that contained the inheritance of the great Emperor of Ancient. If this news were to spread, the entire fire domain would be shocked. I don't know what happened to the Fire God Palace in the past few days. They sent out countless experts to scout around the fire domain. We have to hurry up just in case. The young man, Zhu Guxiao, frowned. These days, the Fire God Palace's movements made him feel uneasy. According to the Fire God Palace's speed, it was very likely that they would discover their movements. Even if we want to be fast, there's no other way. The inheritance of the Ice Sword sect is in conflict with the flame restriction of the Divine Pagoda. Gu Tianqian smiled bitterly. They also wanted to break the restriction as soon as possible to avoid any unexpected changes. However, the restriction left behind by the great Emperor of Ancient could be triggered with the slightest carelessness. They had to be careful. At this moment, the one-eyed man, who had been silent all this time, suddenly exclaimed, "Eldest senior brother, what's wrong?" Zhu Guxiao and Gu Tianqian both looked at the master of the Ice Sword sect, Tang Junwu, who was also their senior brother. The restriction of the Divine Pagoda seems to be a little different. Tang Junwu looked over and carefully sensed it. Buzz, buzz. At this moment, the ancient restriction in the Divine Pagoda suddenly trembled. Soon after, countless ancient flame runes emerged from the Divine Tower. A vast and boundless emperor aura swept out, shaking everything within a radius of millions of miles. Even the primordial divine array could not conceal it. What happened? The restriction was triggered? Tang Jingwu, Gu Tiancan, and Zhu Guxiao's expressions changed drastically. They immediately stepped forward. Sect Master, we didn't trigger the restriction. What should we do? Should we evacuate first? The experts of the Ice Sword sect all gathered together, looking at the divine pagoda surrounded by fiery runes, cautiously guarding against it. The restriction ancient runes left behind by the primeval emperors. If something went wrong, they would all be buried here. We didn't trigger it? Could it be? When Tang Jingwu and the other two heard this, they looked at each other and saw through each other's thoughts. It couldn't be that someone had snuck in, right? Rumble. Almost in the next instant, a 100-meter-tall pillar of flame shot up into the sky from the top of the divine tower. The sky-shrouding sun-changing formation was directly destroyed, and the pillar of flame shot up into the sky, shaking the thousands of races in the fire domain. A figure rushed out from the top of the divine pagoda, where flames were soaring into the sky. It was Qin Yu, who had tried to sneak into the divine tower with the yin-yang escape talisman. Qin Yu, whose blood and qi were boiling from the impact of the huge pillar of flame, couldn't help but grin. If it weren't for the fact that he had a lot of trump cards, he would have died the moment he was hit. As expected of the inheritance of the Fire Emperor, the slightest carelessness would have killed him. Who is that? When the people of the Ice Sword sect saw Qin Yu appear, they were all startled. They couldn't react in time. As expected, someone has snuck in. Damn it. How dare you ruin the plan of the Ice Sword sect? Tang Jingwu, Zhu Guxiao, and Gu Tiansan's expressions were dark, and their eyes were cold. Whoosh, whoosh. With the slightest hesitation, the three of them immediately rushed out, and a bone-chilling sword qi swept out. That terrifying sword qi also contained endless cold qi that was enough to freeze the 9 heavens and 10 earths. As the three of them rushed out, the air in this area was faintly frozen. The experts of the Ice Sword sect finally reacted, and their killing intent surged as they madly rushed out. They had painstakingly prepared for so many years and were about to succeed, but in the end, it was ruined halfway. How could they not be angry? An early heavenly ethereal stage, and 2 peak heavenly gods. Qin Yu, who was thinking about how to sneak in again, sensed the cold sword qi rapidly approaching, and turned his head to look. Although Qin Yu's cultivation was still only at the heavenly venerate stage, he, who had experienced the void domain battle, wasn't very interested in Tang Jingwu and the other two who were rushing over murderously. Dragon Soul, Qin Yu muttered in his heart. Immediately, with Qin Yu as the center, waves started to appear in the void. Layers upon layers of spatial energy started to spread out. Tang Jingwu and the other two's ice sword Dao secret magics were annihilated before they could even get close to Qin Yu. They didn't cause the slightest injury to Qin Yu. Spatial magics? No, it seems to be able to affect time. This guy has mastered the power of time and space. Tang Jingwu and the other two were greatly shocked. They didn't underestimate Qin Yu because of his heavenly venerate stage cultivation base, and immediately attacked with their secret magics. Formless Sword Dao, Blue Sparrow soars. Ice seals the 9 heavens. This time, they were clearly really angry. Their incomparably violent ice sword Dao whistled and swept out with terrifying might, as if 3 ancient gods of death had come to the world. Heaven battling divine formation. Qin Yu was indifferent. He had the confidence to be indifferent. With a thought, an ancient and mysterious grand formation immediately spread out in the sky. It was the Battle Tribe's clan protection grand formation that he had brought with him. After the battle at the Battle God Temple, no one in the Void Zone dared to cause trouble for the Battle Tribe. Thus, Qin Yu decided to borrow this ancient formation array. After all, Qin Yu was going to deal with the Fire God Palace, the overlord of the Void Zone. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. After the heaven-battling divine formation appeared, It released billions of rays of divine battle intent, which directly shattered Tang Jingwu and the other two's attacks. What kind of formation is this? Such powerful battle intent. It contains the immortal aura of a martial emperor. Could this also be an ancient killing formation refined by a great emperor? The Tang Jingwu trio, who were charging over, could feel an extremely powerful fighting intent pressing down on them. It was as though even the entire world was being suppressed. This caused the expressions of the three of them to become extremely serious. Dragon God, dominating body, ancient spirit of the god of battle, appear. Glancing at Tang Jingwu and the other two who had joined forces and assumed defensive postures, Qin Yu's hands formed a seal. The ancient spirit of the god of battle in the heaven-battling divine formation was immediately awakened and strengthened by him, emitting boundless divine power. What kind of secret technique is this? The expressions of Tang Jingwu and the other two, who were wearing grave expressions, suddenly changed. They couldn't imagine what kind of supreme secret technique could allow a heavenly venerate to instantly raise his cultivation to the heavenly ethereal realm. Chaotic Dragon Spear, kill! Qin Yu yelled. The chaotic dragon spear covered in chaotic chi shook the void and turned into a ray of chaotic divine light, shooting across the sky at an extremely fast speed. Whoosh! A sharp tearing sound was heard. Tang Jingwu and the other two were severely injured and were sent flying while vomiting blood. Qin Yu's spear not only contained the power of the ancient spirit of the god of battle, but also the chaotic killing technique of the primal chaos ancestor dragon. The power of the two was destructive. Secret technique, space splitting. The dragon soul wasn't just watching a show. As it executed the secret technique of time and space, pitch-black spatial cracks appeared around Zhu Guxiao and Gu Tianqian, who were severely injured. Before the two of them could react, they were torn apart by the pitch-black spatial cracks. Tang Jingwu had luckily escaped with his powerful strength, but he was also severely injured. Chapter 795. Secret Space-Time Technique. This person is invincible. I have to run. Tang Jingwu, whose face was pale and his breathing chaotic, was terrified. Without thinking, he immediately broke through the void and fled. A mere heavenly venerable realm cultivator was able to unleash the power of a heavenly ethereal realm expert and master the secret space-time technique. No matter how one looked at it, he didn't seem like a normal person. Could it be that Qin Yu was the reincarnation of an old monster? Master, why are you still standing there? Run. Seeing that even Tang Jingwu had died in such a miserable state, the experts from the Ice Sword sect, who had arrived with a murderous aura, naturally did not dare to stay any longer as they scattered and fled in all directions. Killing two peak heavenly gods in one move and frightening a heavenly ethereal realm expert, they would only be seeking their own deaths if they rushed forward. However, Qin Yu did not chase after them. Those people from the Ice Sword sect. He once again raised his head and looked at the raging flames divine pagoda that was filled with divine flames. With such a big commotion, there was no doubt that all the major forces in the fire field would be alerted. He had to enter the divine tower before those big forces arrived. Otherwise, when the big forces of the fire field arrived, it wouldn't be so easy for him to get his hands on it. Thinking of this, Qin Yu flew into the sky and appeared at the top of the divine tower, approaching the towering pillar of fire. You want to barge in through the pillar of fire? The dragon soul appeared and looked at the pillar of fire. From the pillar of fire, he felt an extremely destructive power. If he barged in directly, his life would be in danger. If Qin Yu hadn't reacted quickly, he wouldn't have been simply blown away by the pillar of fire. The restriction array at the entrance of the divine tower is a bit strange. Even the yin-yang escape talisman can't enter. It should require a special secret technique. If I want to enter directly, this is the only way. Qin Yu naturally knew that sneaking in through the pillar of fire from the top of the tower was extremely dangerous, but he didn't have a better way now. Thinking of this, Qin Yu used the green dragon battle the heavens and entered the dragon god tyrant body. The dragon soul used the space-time ability to affect the space around Qin Yu. Plop! After finishing his preparations, Qin Yu's figure flashed and entered the pillar of flame. The fire power contained in that flaming light pillar was indeed extremely terrifying. Even though Qin Yu was fully equipped, he still felt the blood in his body boiling, as if it was about to combust. Buzz, buzz, buzz. And just as Qin Yu was about to be unable to bear the destructive power of the fire, the faint flame mark in his dantian suddenly trembled. Immediately after, Qin Yu felt a trace of a special aura spread out from within his body and seeped into his limbs and bones. You want to control me? Qin Yu's expression changed slightly. Strands of special soul power surged out from the flame imprint, as if it wanted to control him. Qin Yu was no stranger to that special soul power. It was Hua Jiang, who had told him the location of the Fire Emperor's inheritance and helped him refine the vast sky divine flame. It seemed that Hua Jiang of the Fire Spirit tribe did not have good intentions. Qin Yu's eyes revealed a cold smile. He was not a little brat who did not know anything. Back when he was refining the vast sky divine flame, he had already left a trick up his sleeve. When the wisps of smoke-like soul power seeped into his sea of soul, a vast and boundless immortal pressure suddenly descended. Stop! Accompanied by a miserable cry, the soul power that seeped into his sea of soul immediately melted like snow in spring, quickly disappearing. Qin Yu's eyes flashed coldly. He had the war dragon coil, the immortal refining cauldron, the immortal slaying painting, the immortal subduing palace, and other immortal treasures. A mere remnant soul dared to possess him. It was tired of living. After destroying the wisps of remnant soul, Qin Yu clearly felt that the destructive power contained in the pillar of flame seemed to be less unbearable. Qin Yu could feel that the faint flame mark exuded a special aura fluctuation, which seemed to be able to suppress the destructive power in the pillar of flame. This made Qin Yu's face brighten up. He immediately seized the opportunity and quickly sneaked into the divine tower. Rumble. When Qin Yu followed the pillar of flame and sneaked into the divine tower, the void in the distance shook. A black chariot pulled by a three-headed blood dragon flew through the air, exuding a vast and mighty aura. Obviously, it had a great background. However, when it was about 100 feet away from the divine tower, the three-headed blood dragon trembled in fear and did not dare to take another step forward. It's the Emperor pressure. Could it be that the ancient Emperor's fortune is hidden in this place? No. I've been here before. It was not like this at all, and there was no divine tower. It seems that there's a great secret hidden in this place. Let's go down and have a look. Figures with astonishing auras appeared in the chariot and looked at the divine tower in shock. The vast and boundless Emperor pressure was definitely the supreme Emperor pressure of the ancient Emperor. When they thought that there might be the ancient Emperor's fortune, they were extremely excited and immediately flew over. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. At this moment, another major force flew over. When they saw that someone was approaching, they immediately flew over as they were afraid that someone would take the initiative. After that, the major forces that were closer to the divine tower gathered and the scene was lively. Of course, when they arrived, they were all trapped by the restrictions of the divine tower. When their attacks were ineffective, they immediately went to ask for help from the array masters of the fire domain. Boom! Around half an hour later, a blazing flame tore through the sky like a meteor. Its speed was incredibly fast. That is, the Fire God Palace. The major forces of the fire domain that were working together to break through the restrictions of the divine tower's entrance were shocked when they felt the terrifying heat wave that was as hot as the sun. When they saw the sign of the people who had arrived, their faces changed drastically. The people who had arrived were the experts of the Fire God Palace. The leader was the palace master of the Fire God Palace, Duan Qihua. Beside Duan Qihua was the deputy palace master, Shuiyu. One was very likely to be the inheritance of the ancient emperor. Even the Fire God Palace was extremely tempted. It is indeed the Emperor pressure. When they felt the vast Emperor pressure from the Divine Tower, Duan Chihua and Shui Yu's faces lit up. They immediately led the experts of the Fire God Palace over. In front of the inheritance of the ancient emperor, tracking down Qin Yu and Duan Chihua was insignificant. Palace Master Duan, Deputy Palace Master Shui. The major forces of the Fire Domain nodded. Sect Master Li, Sect Master Zhou, Master Wu, Duan Chihua, who had reached the heavenly ethereal realm and had become the Palace Master of the Fire God Palace, also smiled and greeted the major forces around him. However, in reality, the major forces present all knew that he was a smiling tiger. He was smiling on the surface, but he was merciless behind the scenes. Ever since the Fire God Palace's patriarch had gone into seclusion and Duan Chihua had taken charge of the Fire God Palace, the Fire God Palace had massacred countless clans and sections. Chapter 796. What's wrong? Could it be that you can't enter the Godly Tower? Duan Chihua walked to the front of the Godly Tower and looked at the array masters who were trying their best to break the restrictions. Palace Master Duan, you've come to the right time. You're also an array master. Take a look and see if the restrictions on the Godly Tower are the legendary Emperor runes. One of the array masters clasped his fists at Duan Chihua. To be honest, I've never seen a real Emperor rune before. Duan Chihua smiled and walked up to take a closer look. After all, the last ancient Emperor realm expert in the Fire Domain had been tens of thousands of years ago. After looking for a while, Duan Chihua's smile faded and his gaze turned serious. The stronger one's attainments in the Tao of formations were, the more profound the restriction at the entrance of the Divine Tower was. Most importantly, one needed to have a high attainment in array Tao and a strong cultivation to break the restrictions. One had to be stronger than the heavenly ethereal realm. This made Duan Chihua's expression turn serious, but his heart was filled with joy. It was very likely that such a profound formation was a true Emperor rune. At this moment, Qin Yu, who had sneaked into the Godly Tower along the fire pillar, finally entered the Godly Tower. The first thing that entered his eyes was a giant flaming figure that was at least 1,000 feet tall. It emitted a vast aura, and beside the flaming figure were raging flames. A supreme divine aura that could shake the 9 heavens and 10 earths was constantly emitted, causing one's heart to tremble. Fire Emperor, Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul did not react to the Emperor aura, or rather, they were not affected at all. After all, they had seen existences of a higher level. Whether it was Zhan Wuji of the War Tribe, the Yin Yang God, or the Ancestor Demon statue, none of them were weaker than the Tao Fire. Not to mention the supreme inheritance that Qin Yu had obtained, the inheritance left behind by the War Dragon Immortal King. Finally, someone's here. As Qin Yu and the Dragon's Soul sneaked in, an ancient voice suddenly sounded. This figure was Qin Yu and his soul. His expression suddenly froze, and he immediately became vigilant. However, he did not discover where the ancient voice came from. Knowledge was knowledge, but if they were facing a true, sovereign spirit of the reaching heaven realm, they still had to be vigilant. In the current Fire Domain, the patriarch of the Fire God Palace, who dominated the Fire Domain, was only at the exceptional heavenly ethereal realm. At most, he was half a step into the heavenly palace realm. He definitely had not entered the heavenly palace realm. Otherwise, Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul wouldn't have been able to escape from the hands of the Fire God Palace's old ancestor. And between the heavenly ethereal realm and the heavenly connecting Emperor realm, there was still the heavenly palace realm. Heaven Void realm, Heaven Palace realm, Heaven Connecting realm, these 3 great realms, every small realm difference would result in a huge difference in strength. Therefore, even if it was just a sovereign spirit of the ancient Emperor of Tongtian, it was enough to crush heavenly ethereal stage and even heavenly palace stage. Of course, the exact strength would depend on how much power that martial monarch spirit still possessed. Hey, you guys aren't from the Dragon Clan. Why do you have the dragon bloodline and dragon soul? That ancient voice sounded again, and a figure slowly appeared from within the giant flame silhouette. It was a middle-aged man wearing linen clothes. He didn't look very impressive, but his eyes were extremely terrifying. They seemed to contain endless changes of stars, as if the heavens were being born and destroyed. It made people sink into them with just a glance. Senior Fire Emperor. Seeing that the Emperor's spirit didn't seem to have any evil intentions, Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul looked at each other and bowed. Not only do you have the dragon bloodline, but you also have immortal chi fluctuations. It seems like you guys are people with great luck. The more the Fire Emperor's spirit looked at Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul, the more surprised he was. Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul were even more shocked. The Fire Emperor's spirit's gaze seemed to be penetrating and could see through all their secrets. The heavens really don't open their eyes. It took so long for a successor to pass the restriction test. After looking at Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul, the Fire Emperor's spirit let out a deep sigh. His voice was filled with unconcealable regret. Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul's hearts skipped a beat when they heard this. The two of them didn't enter through the restriction at the entrance. This godly flame pillar is also one of the tests, but the method is different. The entrance can only be triggered by fate, while the godly flame pillar depends on one's talent and strength. The Fire Emperor's spirit saw through Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul's thoughts and said directly, "Does that mean that we can obtain Senior's inheritance now?" Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul let out a sigh of relief and asked, "Of course. Those who obtain my inheritance are considered my disciples, but I'm already dead and my soul is about to dissipate. This rule is useless. I only hope that you can pass the monarch battlefield in the future." The Fire Emperor's spirit nodded and said, "Monarch battlefield? What's that place?" Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul asked when they heard this. At the end of the 10 Directions world is the monarch battlefield. Only those who pass the monarch battlefield can ignite the godly flame and step into a higher level of the divine path. The Fire Emperor's spirit said, "Back then, I was severely injured in the monarch battlefield. In the end, I had to pass away and let my main soul enter the 6 paths in hopes of reincarnation. Ignite the godly flame? Step into the immortal realm? What's going on? Isn't the ancient god realm a separate martial path?" Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul were shocked. They had always thought that the ancient god realm wasn't part of the martial path system. It was a path created by the person who had no hope of becoming an immortal. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case. Of course, more importantly, the monarch battlefield was extremely dangerous to be able to injure the heavenly ancient emperor to the point of passing away. There was actually such a dangerous place in the 10 Directions world. This had also surpassed Qin Yu's expectations. His spirit body seems to have been born with your origin source soul force. Therefore, I will pass my inheritance to you, and you will both benefit from it. If one day you can ignite the godly flame in the monarch battlefield, I hope you can find a suitable person to pass on my inheritance." As the Fire Emperor's spirit finished speaking, spots of flame light appeared on his body. The flame light surged into Qin Yu's body, causing Qin Yu's entire body to be covered in a layer of hazy flame light. At the same time, the Dragon Soul's body trembled slightly as fire runes spread out from its body. Both of them were immersed in a mysterious state. The Tao of heaven and earth was incomparably clear. Sky Saint Realm, Sky God Realm, Sky Ethereal Realm, Sky Palace Realm, Sky Ascension Realm. Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul had yet to enter the martial path. The mysteries of the martial path were broken down by a mysterious method and appeared in their minds very easily. Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul immediately understood. The inheritance of the Fire Emperor's spirit, in addition to the Fire Tao's origin source secret technique, was his comprehension of the martial path. All of it was clearly transmitted into their minds. Although this would not allow their cultivations to directly reach a higher level, it would allow their future martial path to be smooth sailing. Boom! After about half an hour, Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul retreated from the mysterious state. There was also an incomparably powerful aura that swept out from their bodies. Their cultivation had officially entered the Sky Saint realm. Chapter 797. Rumble. When Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul obtained the Fire Emperor's inheritance and entered the Sky Saint realm, the originally indestructible barrier at the entrance of the Divine Tower suddenly exploded. Powerful shockwaves swept out, forcing everyone to take a step back. Their faces were filled with shock. The barrier broke on its own? Could it be? Duan Chihua, who was thinking of ways to break the barrier, was shocked and quickly retreated. The barrier of the Divine Tower was definitely left behind by a sky-piercing Emperor Realm elite. Even with his array skills, he couldn't do anything about it. But now, the indestructible ancient barrier had broken. This made Duan Chihua think of a possibility. Let's go. Of course, some things had to be seen with their own eyes. Duan Chihua immediately rushed into the Divine Tower, followed by Xian Yu and the other Fire God Palace elites. The other experts of the fire field who had gathered naturally would not miss this opportunity. They swarmed over as well. The fortune this time is really not small. In the center of the Divine Tower, Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul, who had regained their senses, let out a sigh of relief. Their eyes were clear and bright. They were clear about their future martial realms. From now on, there would be no obstacles on their path of cultivation. They could go all the way in one go. Rumble. Suddenly, there was a violent explosion. The ancient door in the center of the Divine Tower was forcefully blasted open. Figures with powerful auras rushed in. The person in the lead was naturally the palace master of the Fire God Palace, Duan Chihua. Behind him was the Vice Palace Master Shui Yu and the other elders of the Fire God Palace. Behind them were the various factions of the Fire Domain. Someone has beaten us to it. Duan Chihua, who had previously guessed, looked at Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul with a cold, murderous look in his eyes. He could feel that the fluctuations coming from Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul were very similar to the flames in the Divine Tower. They obviously came from the same source. Now, the Great Emperor's inheritance in the Divine Tower had been obtained by Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul. It's you? Enemies really do meet on a narrow road. I've been looking for you everywhere, but it turns out that you're here. Behind Duan Chihua, Xian Yu's pupils shrank. He was extremely familiar with Qin Yu's appearance, and that aura was something that he would never forget. If it wasn't for Qin Yu, the anciently fire dragon cultivated by the Fire God Palace wouldn't have gone berserk. And from the looks of it, it was very likely that the inheritance of the Great Emperor had already been obtained by Qin Yu. This caused the killing intent in Xian Yu's heart to grow even stronger. Just as well, new and old debts could be settled together. Their auras. Did they obtain the inheritance of the Divine Pagoda? Two mere quintessential saint stage powerhouses dare to lay their hands on such an inheritance? You're courting death. The large factions from the Fire Domain who had followed them also immediately noticed Qin Yu and Lin Dong. They sized them up with unconcealable disdain in their eyes. In front of them, let alone two sky saint stage powerhouses, even two heavenly deity stage powerhouses were nothing to them. Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul, who were being stared at by the crowd, did not feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, they were calm. They had seen many higher cultivation realms, and the people in front of them were nothing to them. Although there were a few heavenly ethereal realm powerhouses present, Qin Yu was not afraid of them. Suddenly, Qin Yu sensed an extremely subtle fluctuation. Qin Yu, who had merged with the Fire Emperor's inheritance, had a deep understanding of the higher cultivation realms, including some martial Dao operations. None of it could escape his eyes. Using such despicable means is a disgrace to the name of the Fire God Palace. Qin Yu did not say anything, and the chaotic dragon spear appeared. He flicked the tip of the spear and dispersed all the fluctuations in the dark. Xian Yu, who had secretly attacked with a secret technique to suppress Qin Yu, suddenly retreated with a muffled groan. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. At the same time, His eyes widened in disbelief. There was a huge difference between different cultivation realms. Not to mention the difference of two cultivation realms. Even if there was only a slight difference, it would be like a natural chasm. It would be fine if he was only discovered by Chinyu, but Chinyu had injured him with a single move. It was impossible for someone of the same cultivation realm to do so. You have stepped into the heavenly, ethereal realm? No, my senses are definitely not wrong. You are indeed only in the heavenly saint stage, Chinyu said in disbelief. He could not believe that he was injured by Chinyu. One should know that the current Chinyu is different from before. He did not lay down an ancient array to help him. He has control over the Divine Tower's great emperor's inheritance. Duan Chiwa narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "The great emperor's inheritance is indeed hidden here. A heavenly ethereal realm powerhouse can actually injure a heavenly ethereal realm powerhouse. This ability is too terrifying." Many people from the various forces had entered. When they heard what Duan Chiwa said, they all stared at Chinyu with burning eyes, as if they were looking at a peerless treasure that was hard to come by in 10,000 years. The inheritance of a great emperor was not something that could only be seen once every 10,000 years. Even in 100 million years, one might not be able to see the tomb of a great emperor. No one knew who took the lead, but everyone blurted out words to suppress Duan Chiwa. Hand over the Fire Emperor's inheritance. All the major forces of the Fire Domain are here. It's better to hand over the Fire Emperor's inheritance quickly. The Divine Fire Sect is willing to accept you. Why don't you come quickly? We can promise you the position of an elder. In an instant, some people tried to persuade Duan Chiwa, and some even tried to recruit him by promising him the position of an elder. Chinyu rejected them without hesitation. As he had expected, regardless of whether they were trying to coerce or bribe him, the only goal of the major forces was the Fire Emperor's inheritance. You don't know what's good for you. All the major forces of the Fire Domain are here. Do you know how powerful we are if we join forces? Seeing that Chinyu was indifferent, some people's faces turned ferocious and murderous. Just nice. I'll use you to test my power. Now, Chinyu sneered and shouted in a low voice. Whoosh! Unknowingly, bursts of flames suddenly ignited within the divine pagoda and silently fell down. Wherever the silent flames passed, the ground would be scorched black and mottled. To be able to leave scorched black marks in the divine tower, one could imagine how high the temperature of the flames was. If it landed on a human body, it would be extremely powerful. Everyone in the fire domain was a fire expert. With just a glance, they could see the level of power represented by the flames. It was a level that most of the people present could not reach. It was the peak of the heavenly ethereal realm. The inheritance that Chinyu had received was not just martial arts experience. It also included the ownership of the Divine Tower. The flames were just one of the many. Its special feature was that it could be activated with one's own strength, and it could display strength that was higher than 2 realms. Although it's only at the peak of the heavenly ethereal realm, it's enough to deal with you. Duan Chiwa suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. It was as if something extremely terrifying was about to happen. Quick retreat. Everyone, retreat from the Divine Tower. He had already realized that the flames would only stay within the Divine Tower. However, his reminder was too late. Before anyone could retreat, they were already enveloped by the flames. A leader of a major force who had stepped into the heavenly ethereal realm went forward to test the flames, attempting to break the cage of flames. However, just as he stretched out his hand, it was burned by the powerful flames. If he had not retracted his hand quickly enough, his entire hand would have been destroyed. Duan Chihua's face was gloomy and extremely ugly. With such a powerful strength, he won't be able to hold on for long. We should take advantage of this time to capture him as soon as possible. However, the reality was the opposite. The people who were encouraged by his words all rushed forward, but they were all defeated. Phoenix transformation. Boundless heavenly fire. All of the people who rushed up were more or less seriously injured. After catching their own people, they did not care about the fact that the Fire God Palace was the #1 force in the fire domain and surrounded them angrily. Before they could do anything, there was a sudden change. Screams of agony rang out one after another. Chapter 798. Suddenly, the fire grew stronger and engulfed everyone in it. Whether it was those who were about to attack, or those who had just attacked but were defeated, all of them were covered in flames. Cries of agony could be heard. The blood-curdling screams rang out continuously. Even some of the top experts who were confident in their strength couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Roar! Immediately after, the originally chaotic and sporadic flames suddenly condensed together, forming an ancient divine dragon. Although the people from the fire territory and other top forces had gathered and attacked together, they were powerless against the gigantic fire dragon. Qin Yu waved his finger gently, and the tail of the fire dragon dissipated for a moment. Indeed, it's a little too much for a quintessential saint to perform such precise maneuvers. However, it's enough to deal with all of you, Dragon Soul. The Dragon Soul, who had been waiting by the side, could not wait to charge out. He was already unhappy with these people. The moment the Dragon Soul appeared, he used his space-time ability to wreak havoc. In just a few breaths' time, there were a few fresh corpses on the floor of the God's Pagoda. The top forces who were already at odds with each other showed their weakness in the face of danger. You push me, I push you. They would rather others die than let their own people get hurt. Flames shot out of Duan Chihua's eyes. He suddenly shouted and used all his strength to disperse the flames around him. You just SOSO. As soon as he finished his words, he met the Dragon Soul's gaze. Although it was just a quintessential Saint Realm Dragon Soul, he could see the vastness of the universe in its eyes. Just as he was in a state of shock, the situation around him suddenly changed. It was as though he was the only one left in the world. Everyone was distancing themselves from him. It was as though he was the only one left in the world. No, there was still the Dragon Soul. It was the space-time illusory realm. Duan Chihua finally understood that it was the power of space-time. The power of space-time was so profound that it was almost impossible for him to touch it at his cultivation level. However, he actually saw such powerful control of space-time in a quintessential saint realm. No wonder you could steal the ancient dragon's blood essence and increase your strength again in such a short time. You really have something to rely on. The dragon's soul snorted in disdain as its deep gaze landed on the palace master of the Fire God Palace. Although they were in the void virtual world, they were still in the space of the godly pagoda. Duan Chihua's cultivation was suppressed, so the Dragon Soul was naturally not afraid. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already started fighting in this space-time ethereal world. Qin Yu's opponent was Vice Palace Master Shui Yu. Shui Yu's expression was solemn. So what if Qin Yu was only at the quintessential saint stage? With the help of various divine abilities, he was no longer weaker than him. In fact, he was even slightly stronger. It's time to settle the score with you for stealing the ancient dragon blood essence from the Fire God Palace. Before the voice of the celestial realm had even faded, they had already made their move. Fire God's Palm. The Fire God's Palm was his most exquisite divine ability. It was also one of the best divine arts in the entire Fire God Palace. In the entire fire domain, there were only a handful of people who could comprehend this exquisite martial art. Shui Yu was the one who had cultivated this martial art to the peak. He had purposely made his move before he had finished his words. He wanted to catch Qin Yu off guard. However, his palm strike, which was filled with confidence, missed. Unknowingly, Qin Yu was already standing behind him. Fire God's Palm? Why don't you try the Fire God's Palm that I have modified? How could the inheritance of a great emperor be so simple? Of course, the most important thing was the experience of martial arts. However, there were many other miscellaneous martial arts as well. When Shui Yu made his move, Shui Yu had already determined where his attack would land. He then made use of his ingenious positioning to arrive behind Shui Yu in an instant. It was the same Fire God's palm. Qin Yu struck out with his palm. The palm print rose with the wind. As the flames on the palm print gradually expanded, it formed a force that was as heavy as Mount Tai. Shuiyu had nowhere to hide. He had no choice but to take the blow head-on. A mouthful of blood spurted out like a sharp sword. After spitting out this mouthful of blood, Shuiyu's face turned ashen. His aura was more than 20% weaker than before. This did not include the injuries on his body. This palm strike contained the ancient flames that had been stored in the godly pagoda for hundreds of thousands of years. Even if it was just a tiny bit, it was not something that Shuiyu could resist. The flames would constantly burn his organs. If he did not obtain any treasures, he would definitely lose his life in less than half a month. During this process, he would suffer immense pain. He would not be able to rest in peace day and night. Dragon Soul, come back. Stop playing. At this moment, the ground inside the godly pagoda was covered in a layer of sticky blood. After hearing the call, the dragon soul immediately retracted its divine power. Its figure flashed across space and arrived behind Qinyu. Duan Qihua could not do anything to the dragon soul. Although he could protect himself, it was also frustrating to be trapped in an isolated space. He had just found a weak point in space and was about to break it. Suddenly, the divine power that trapped him disappeared without a trace. He was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Now it's time to end this. Shuiyu was already a cripple. As long as he went up and dealt another blow, he would be finished. The remaining palace master of the Fire God Palace was not a concern. Those who were still alive were uneasy. They looked at the two figures outside the sea of fire with fear in their eyes. Curses and begging could be heard. Qinyu slowly clenched his fist. The fire dragon that had been hovering above their heads suddenly rushed down. Keep! This time, no one was able to escape. Suddenly, there was a thick layer of dust on the ground. Only a few powerful people, such as Duan Qihua and Shuiyu, were still struggling to hold on. If you kill me, you will become the enemy of the entire Fire God Palace. Is that so? Qinyu suddenly flipped his hand and formed a hand seal. He then said a word with an ancient tone. Explode. At this point, no matter if it was the palace master of the Fire God Palace or the people from the other forces in the Inferno prison, they were all dead. As long as they stepped into the Divine Tower and coveted the inheritance, none of them were left alive. Those who stayed outside the Divine Tower only saw a vast ancient dragon rushing out from the blazing fire. They saw that the place that was supposed to be crowded with people was now empty. There were only char marks left. At the same time, an old man who was sitting inside the Fire God Palace suddenly opened his eyes. There seemed to be endless divine power flowing in his eyes. Suddenly, he looked at the direction of the Divine Tower. With a wave of his long robe, he disappeared in a flash. Qinyu, who had just finished a battle, did not even have the time to collect his spoils of war. In the void, there was a surge of clouds. A figure appeared and rushed into the Divine Tower at a speed that no one could capture. The people guarding outside the tower all felt the powerful pressure, and none of them dared to move in the slightest. However, Qinyu and the Dragon Soul in the Divine Tower were not affected at all. They just looked at the person calmly. Chapter 799. However, his voice was heard before he even saw him. You were lucky enough to escape last time. I didn't expect you to return to the fire domain. Along with the voice came a towering aura. Those standing outside the Divine Pagoda were only slightly affected. They covered their chests and vomited. Blood dyed their clothes red, and they ran as far as they could. However, the two figures in the Divine Pagoda weren't affected at all. Their eyes were still calm, but there was a hint of understanding in them. So, it's the Fire God Palace's Lao Tzu. I was wondering who it was, bullying us from afar. You are indeed the Fire God Palace's Lao Tzu. Qinyu sneered as he recalled the time when he was chased by the Fire God Palace's Lao Tzu. The Fire God Palace's Lao Tzu, who had just arrived, was furious. He didn't even see who said that. He waved his sleeve, and a bright flame appeared. Sparks flickered and danced. It was as though the surrounding air was about to be burned up. However, Such a flame was child's play in front of the divine pagoda's ancient fire. Qin Yu followed the inheritance memory and formed a complicated hand seal. The flames that were originally attacking him were now docilely held in his palm. Then he casually tossed it into the ancient flame, allowing it to be swallowed up. Although the flame was nothing in front of the ancient fire, it was a sacred fire with great potential that the Laozu had been searching for a long time. The flame was only 10,000 years old, but it already possessed great strength. As long as it was given more time, the small flame would definitely grow to a more powerful stage. The Laozu was frustrated that he had lost the sacred fire that he had painstakingly searched for without even seeing the person clearly. Although it didn't spit out blood, it was still painful. Emperor Weapon. After seeing the divine pagoda clearly, the Laozu couldn't help but have greed in his eyes. He also deduced what had happened from the marks on the ground. Hand over the Fire Emperor's inheritance, and I'll let bygones be bygones. As the Fire God Palace's Laozu spoke, he unleashed the terrifying aura of a heavenly palace realm. Even though he was just standing there, the surrounding space seemed to be unstable and produced powerful airwaves. However, the situation that the old ancestor had imagined did not happen. In his opinion, the junior, who was merely at the quintessential saint stage, did not show him any respect at all. With the old and new grudges added together, the old ancestor had already made his move. Heavenly Fire's descent. Qin Yu and the dragon's soul cooperated with each other, activating the imperial might of the divine pagoda while setting up the heavenly god battle formation. I don't care what kind of sacred flame you are. Since you are in front of me, you better submit obediently. When the formation was set up, the patriarch suddenly felt a fatal danger. Just as he was about to escape, the surrounding time and space suddenly changed. Ripples that were hard to see with the naked eye trapped him in the formation. A quintessential saint that should have been weak to the point of being easily crushed actually had such powerful strength. One had to know that he had already stepped into the heavenly palace. Do you think a small formation can trap me? Too naive. All of a sudden, the old ancestor of the Fire God Palace exploded with a powerful force. The powerful energy waves caused all kinds of strange phenomena. Thick fog rose and turned into an azure dragon, or the faint silhouette of an immortal. The celestial palace realm was not something that could be destroyed so easily. However, the heavenly god battle formation was not an ordinary formation. Even though it was shaken by the powerful force, it was still stable. However, if he wanted to destroy the heavenly palace stage in one fell swoop, he still had to add fuel to the fire. Qin Yu quickly searched through his inherited memories. When he found it, his hands began to move. Summon. It was still a simple and boundless syllable. It was as if the voice did not come from someone's mouth, but from an almighty from the ancient times. Divine Fire. The real divine fire was a bright golden color. It was the fire seed left behind by the Fire Emperor. The bright and powerful divine fire was integrated into the formation. Inside the formation, the old ancestor of the Fire God Palace let out an extremely tragic cry. Suddenly, he turned into ashes. The power of the divine fire surprised Qin Yu. It was faster than he had expected. Even a heavenly palace stage could not last long under the power of the divine fire. As soon as it touched the divine fire, it turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. After the dragon's soul checked, it suddenly walked over and said, the old ancestor of the Fire God Palace had a backup plan. It was not his original body that came. Not his original body? It's okay. Let's kill our way up. Since you and I have just broken through, we need some treasures to consolidate our realms and level up again. If someone had heard of this earlier, they would have laughed their heads off. They had just leveled up, especially in the quintessential martial sage realm. How difficult would it be to break through again? For most people, to be able to find the opportunity to break through again within 1,000 years, they were already the cream of the crop. Although it was not the original body of the old ancestor of the Fire God Palace, it was still his important spiritual body. If the spiritual body was turned into ashes, the original body would be severely injured. It would not be able to recover in a short period of time. Qin Yu brought the dragon's soul and rushed out of the divine pagoda. All that was left to the people who were guarding outside the divine pagoda was his back view. In the sacred ground of the Fire God Palace, an old man with a sage-like demeanor spat out a mouthful of blood. With a wave of his hand, the blood disappeared without a trace. If it wasn't for his slightly pale face, no one would be able to tell that he had just spat out his heart's blood, which was extremely important to the martial Tao. Since when could a quintessential Saint Realm fight against a Heaven Palace Realm expert and even kill him? The more the old ancestor thought about it, the more fearful he got. He frowned as he thought about the details of the battle. It should be the inheritance of the Fire Emperor. After all, he is a great emperor of the heaven-reaching realm. It's not strange for him to have such means. With this thought, the old ancestor of the Fire God Palace was about to stand up. Suddenly, he slipped and fell to the ground. This was something that he would never have dared to think about in the past. That was a Heaven Palace realm expert. He was only one step away from the pinnacle of the realm. How could he fall on flat ground? However, the spiritual body of the old ancestor of the Fire God Palace was turned into ashes. His body was also severely injured, and his body was extremely weak. It was not difficult for him to make such a comical move. Soon, Qin Yu and the Dragon's Soul arrived at the Fire God Palace again, above the boundless sea of fire. As for the location of the divine hall of the Fire God Palace, it was easy to confirm. It was the towering divine hall that was suspended in the sky. In the entire fire domain, the Fire God Palace was the dominant force, and the surrounding forces could not develop at all. It was a situation where those who obeyed would prosper, and those who opposed would perish. Qin Yu looked afar at the majestic and luxurious palace. On the plaque above, there were 3 flamboyant words: Fire God Palace. Before this, Qin Yu had only come to the Sea of Fire with the Dragon's Soul. He had never really infiltrated the Fire God Palace. It seems like this is the place. Qin Yu rushed in with the Dragon's Soul. He killed the Fire God Palace members who came to stop him. Quick, quick, quick! They're coming in. Activate the barrier quickly. The invisible barrier did stop him, but it was only for a moment. Any defense would be vulnerable in front of the divine fire. It was only the size of a fingernail, but it was enough to break the entire barrier. Chapter 800. In the spiritual land, in the deepest part of the Fire God Palace, the Fire God Palace Patriarch was talking to a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man had some stubble on his face, and he looked determined. His aura was harmonious, and his aura was on par with the Fire God Palace Patriarch. 100 years ago, we agreed to meet today. Today, I'm here. Do you welcome me? Hearing the hearty laughter, the Fire God Palace Patriarch laughed as well. Ocean Region's Neptune Palace Master, how can we not welcome you? Who dares to not welcome you? The Neptune Palace Master was here for the appointment. After a short conversation, he noticed something was amiss. Why is the aura on your body so unstable? It seems like you have just been severely injured. He had just been severely injured, and even the spiritual body that he had painstakingly cultivated was destroyed. The Fire God Palace Patriarch couldn't help but clench his teeth in anger when he mentioned this. This matter must never be mentioned again. Originally, I discovered the Fire Emperor's inheritance. This should have been a great thing. However, who would have thought that a quintessential saint stage brat would appear out of nowhere? After snatching the inheritance, he actually didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and destroyed my spiritual body. As such, it's inevitable that my strength would be affected. After hearing this, the Neptune Palace Master immediately expressed that if that person appeared again, he would definitely kill that person. He was from the sea region, and the Fire Emperor's inheritance was of little use to him. He might as well use it as a favor to befriend a Sky Palace Realm Almighty. As the two of them were chatting, there was a sudden commotion in the spiritual land, forcing the two of them to come out. They saw that there were corpses all over the place. The protective enchantment was shattered into pieces, and only 1/10 of it was left. There were only a handful of people who survived. Qin Yu walked over slowly with the Dragon's Soul, as though he was patrolling his own territory. The Fire God Palace Patriarch was so angry that his chest hurt. The place where he was previously injured was still hurting. "So you're here. I finally forced you out." Chinyu smiled as he took out the chaotic dragon spear. "Let's end this quickly." The Neptune Palace Master took a step forward and appeared in front of the Fire God Palace Patriarch. Even when he realized that there was one more person, Chinyu's attack didn't stop. Azure Dragon battling the heavens. In a daze, the Sea God Palace's Palace Master seemed to see a giant azure dragon circling around, glaring angrily at him. He raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl as he charged toward him. It was precisely because of the influence of this trace of Azure Dragon True Chi that the Sea God Palace Master unconsciously took out his most powerful defensive technique. However, Chinyu's real target was the Fire God Palace's Laozu, who was hiding behind him. The tip of the spear shook slightly and brushed past him, aiming straight for the Fire God Palace's old ancestor. This time, there was nowhere to hide. Sacred Flame Shield. He was already injured, and using this move in a moment of panic was only an instinct to save his own life. How could he possibly block Chinyu's ferocious attack? The outcome of the Fire God Palace's old ancestor was obvious. He was pierced through by the spear. However, the Heavenly Palace level was still a Heavenly Palace level being. Even though he had been pierced by the Chaos Dragon spear, he was still breathing. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Even the Sea Goddess Palace Master was unable to react in time. By the time he reacted, it was already a foregone conclusion. Even he did not have the ability to reverse the situation. He might as well carry some medicine with him. Although it was extremely precious, it was more important to gain the friendship of a Heavenly Palace level being. No matter what, he was doing a favor at no cost. Even if he had to pay, it would not be too much. Chinyu was not disappointed at all. If such a simple spear could kill a Heavenly Palace level being, that would be truly strange. As for the one beside him, the dragon's soul suddenly said, this person's aura seems to be from the sea region. The Sea Goddess Palace Master from the sea region? I see. Seeing that the two of them were obviously friends, Chinyu felt that this matter seemed to be a little tricky. The combined strength of two Heavenly Palace level beings was definitely powerful. Even if he had a trump card, things would definitely become troublesome. After swallowing the top-notch medicine, the Fire God Palace's old ancestor had recovered a little. Of course, it was impossible for him to fully recover in a short period of time. However, at least he had regained his vitality. After regaining some strength, the first thing he did was to hold the Sea Goddess Palace Master's hand tightly. "You and I have known each other for many years. Why don't you do me a favor and work together to kill this kid?" He was about to agree, but on second thought, Chinyu was someone who had inherited the Fire Emperor's legacy. Although such a person was only at the quintessential saint level, he could severely injure a Heavenly Palace level being at such a low level. Even if he joined in, he would definitely have to pay the price. Speaking of friendship, it was even more nonsense. He knew a little about the things that the Fire God Palace had done all year round. They would slaughter people and plunder their treasures. Of course, in the previous incident, he had also taken a share of the loot. That was why both sides had maintained such a good relationship. This is a grudge between the Fire Domain. I'm just a guest in the Fire Domain. I'm afraid it's not convenient for me to interfere. Obviously, he hesitated. Offending a young man who would definitely have a bright future would not do him any good. The Fire God Palace's old ancestor had known each other for hundreds of years. How could he not know what the Sea Goddess Palace Master was thinking? Gritting his teeth, he still told her about the incident. "This kid has a secret skill that can subdue the bloodline of the Dragon Clan. That's the legendary Dragon Clan." He didn't believe that the astute Sea Goddess Hall Master would give up on such a huge benefit. He also did not believe that the current Sea Goddess Palace Master would say something as nonsensical as inconvenient to interfere. Indeed, no one would not covet the legendary Dragon Clan. One had to know that even a dragon with the bloodline of the Dragon Clan was an existence that everyone would fight over. Its strength was so strong that everyone coveted it, not to mention the precious materials on the dragon's body, whether it was the dragon's tendons, bones, scales, or blood. If it could be tamed, no one would be willing to kill a dragon with the bloodline of the dragon clan. It would be the strongest partner and the most trustworthy and loyal subordinate. Is the news reliable? If the news was true, perhaps he could also snatch it. Even if he was a genius, so what? He was a genius who had not grown up yet. No matter how great his achievements would be in the future, at least for now, he could not be compared to the two of them who were in the heavenly palace realm. The conversation between the two was completed in a short time. Qin also wanted to see whether the sea goddess palace master was an enemy or a friend. In the end, as expected, even the people of the sea domain wanted to interfere. However, their purpose this time was not for the Fire Emperor's inheritance. It was for the secret skill to tame the Dragon Clan's bloodline. Secret skill? Qin pointed the tip of his spear at the sea goddess palace master's face. If you want it, you have to defeat me first. Those who were still alive were in disbelief. Chapter 801. How could someone be so arrogant to challenge two heavenly palace realms when he had just stepped into the quintessential saint realm? Although one of them was severely injured, the gap between the realms wasn't something that could be closed with just a few injuries. Moreover, there was still the Neptune Palace Master. The dragon's soul stared at the two heavenly palace realms in front of him. Not only was he not suppressed by their aura, but he was also filled with battle intent. He couldn't wait to test his skills against two heavenly palace realm experts. This kid is really arrogant. If you don't make a move now, when are you going to wait? The Fire God Palace Patriarch stood up and stared at the Neptune Palace Master. There was no turning back now. Moreover, he really wanted to obtain the secret skill that could tame the Dragon Clan bloodline. Therefore, he could only move forward. Suddenly, he closed his eyes and muttered to himself. Suddenly, the air became humid and fresh, as though they were near the water or the coast. Sky-conquering river. A vast river meandered down like a ribbon. Droplets of water floated in the air, sparkling with light. Water was soft yet firm. The meandering ribbon-like river itself was the most powerful weapon. It was also the strongest combat skill of the Neptune Palace Master. Now that the Neptune Palace Master had taken out his trump card, the Fire God Palace Patriarch no longer hid anything. The fire region was fundamentally different from the sea region. His strongest trump card should have been the Sea of Fire. However, after witnessing Qin Yu's strength, he didn't dare to summon flames. After pondering for a while, he took out an 8 trigrams compass. The word Li lit up and radiated in all directions with the Fire God Palace Patriarch as the center. Waves of heat waves seemed to be roasting all life and squeezing out every last bit of moisture. The sky-conquering river was in front and the heat wave behind. Qin Yu was pincered by 2 heavenly palace realm experts. The front and back were fire and water, forming the 8 trigrams chaotic aura. At this moment, the 2 heavenly palace realm experts had already used all their trump cards. Battle dragon coiling. Suddenly, dozens of figures rose behind Qin Yu. They were either roaring ferociously or hovering gently. However, the aura on their bodies was enough to make one shudder. Ancestor Demon Statue. Suddenly, the area around the Fire God Palace was shrouded by an extremely terrifying aura. An ominous feeling welled up in the Sea Goddess Hall Master's heart. He seemed to have unknowingly provoked a terrifying existence. He was the one who had awakened such a terrifying existence. As soon as the Ancestor Demon Statue appeared, the 2 Heaven Palace tier cultivators were like paper tigers, unable to withstand a single blow. Regardless of whether it was the heavenly river or the airwaves, they were all destroyed. The 2 heavenly palace realm masters fell to the ground like ragdolls. Even before he died, he still could not believe he would die in the hands of a quintessential saint stage powerhouse. This was especially true for the Sea Goddess Hall's Hall Master. At the moment before her death, her heart was filled with regret. Sure enough, he shouldn't have made a move because of that bit of greed. How could someone who had mastered the secret technique to tame the Dragon Clan's bloodline be bullied by him like those people in the past. After the two died, the images that filled the sky and the terrifying aura slowly disappeared. However, it left a deep impression on those who were still alive in the Fire God Palace. What the hell is going on? Could it be that my eyes are playing tricks on me? How could the patriarch die? The patriarch is dead? The ancestor is really dead. Could it be that the heavens want the Fire God Palace to perish? In just one night, not only did the palace master and deputy palace master die, but even the patriarch who had been protecting the Fire God Palace and had given them their current status had died. If even a heavenly palace realm powerhouse could not withstand it, did they really have any hope of surviving? The ancestor demon statue was powerful, and its destructive power was also quite shocking. There was basically no place under Qin Yu's feet that was safe. He followed the dragon's soul to take a look in the sky and saw that the Fire God Palace was already in chaos. Those who were still alive quickly packed up their belongings and fled. Suddenly, he saw a person who was dressed in bright clothes and seemed to be the leader. He was about to go down and ask for directions. It was too trivial to rely on his eyes to find the real treasure in the huge Fire God Palace. As soon as he landed, the person saw him and the dragon's soul. He was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He knelt on the ground and kept muttering, "Don't kill me, get up." Qin Yu took 2 steps back in disgust. This person's strength was not bad. He was more or less a fish that had slipped through the net and entered the quintessential saint realm. He did not expect him to be so cowardly that he did not even dare to raise his head to look at him. Just by standing there, he was already scared to this extent. In fact, this person was just frightened by the aura that the ancestor demon statue had just released. He even felt a sense of fear towards the instigator of all this. At this moment, if Qin Yu asked him to go east, he would definitely not dare to go west. Where's the Fire God treasure vault? The steward, who was originally trembling in fear, suddenly became energetic. Without another word, he brought Qin Yu to the treasure vault that he had not been to many times before. Because of his deep memory, there were no mistakes in the process. "Don't kill me, I'll leave now." As soon as he brought the person to the place, Qin Yu was wondering if he should give him something as a reward. The person had already turned and ran, and his running speed was actually top-notch. Even in the quintessential saint realm, this person's running speed was enough to be ranked among the best. Puzzled, Qin Yu glanced at the dragon's soul standing beside him. "Do I look that scary?" The dragon's soul laughed, killing 2 heavenly palace realms in one move. "No matter how good-looking you are, you'll still scare people to death." Outside the Fire God treasure vault, there were naturally several protective measures. There were several keyholes, and there were even more profound passwords inside. As for the key, it was relatively simple. The old ancestor had always carried the key to the Fire God treasure vault with him, and the dragon soul had conveniently put away just now. However, the password inside was somewhat difficult to crack. It could only be opened through various means. In the end, Qin Yu was too lazy to do it slowly and directly broke through all the protective measures by force. Since he had the strength, why did he have to follow the rules? He could just break through everything with brute force. It had to be said that there were indeed some things inside the Fire God treasure vault that was so tightly protected. Inside were various treasures of heaven and earth that the Fire God Palace had plundered through various means over the years. Not to mention the variety and the value of all the items in the vault. Just looking at it alone was a dazzling array of items. It was even more abundant than the inventory of the largest trading center in the Fire Domain. Now that he had become the master of the Fire God Palace, he naturally took these items with a smile. There were many treasures of heaven and earth that were really effective for him. He refined them one by one, and soon he had refined many treasures of heaven and earth. His strength was steadily increasing. During the refining process, it was difficult to feel the passage of time. Chapter 802. Unknowingly, an afternoon had passed. All the treasures in the treasury had been refined by him. Even the dragon soul that had been by his side had benefited greatly. A powerful shockwave that soared into the sky blew up the entire treasury. It was as if thunder had exploded in the sky. The people who lived around the Fire God Palace looked over, trying to guess what had happened to cause such a huge commotion. There were only a few people who had yet to leave the Fire God Palace. Suddenly, they felt a powerful and familiar aura. They were so shocked that they trembled. They then looked at the source of the sound in shock. Gosh, how long has it been? He has broken through again. How long has it been since he broke through to the quintessential saint realm to the intermediate realm? Not even a day. Run. When he is done with everything, he might attack us. Let's leave the things that we can't take. Let's leave first. In an instant, the few people who were still in the Fire God Palace threw away the bags in their hands. They ran out of the door with all their might. They were afraid that the possibility of Qin Yu coming to settle the score with them was slim to none. One had to know that their living palace had done this many times. They would first charge in and plunder, and then finally kill everyone, cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. Judging others by their own standards, of course, they were worried that Qin Yu would do the same thing. However, Qin Yu had no intention of killing them. First of all, he did not take those people seriously. Furthermore, they would not be like the Fire God Palace, killing every single one of them that they could find. His strength had broken through to the next level. Now, he was sure that if he encountered a Heavenly Palace realm expert again, he would not have to use his trump card to crush them like before. Even with his own strength, he had the guts to go head-to-head with a Heavenly Palace realm expert and not be at a disadvantage. Qin Yu looked at his fist and slowly clenched it. It felt so good to be full of strength. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a direction. He could feel that there was an abundance of energy there. There was even a strong dragon aura. Let's go. Let's meet the ancient leaf fire dragon again. After the Fire God Palace's old ancestor sealed the vast sea of fire, the ancient leaf fire dragon had fallen into a deep slumber. However, when Qin Yu and his companion arrived again, the ancient leaf fire dragon opened its eyes and immediately sensed a familiar aura. He could feel the aura of his own essence blood from the person in front of him. That was the most important part of his body. There was no way he would mistake it. It's you. You still dare to come. How did your strength increase so quickly? You've already reached the intermediate quintessential saint stage. Shock, doubt, and disbelief. In a short period of time, the ancient leaf fire dragon felt 3 different emotions coming from itself. Qin Yu slowly walked over with the dragon soul. This vast sea of fire automatically separated a clean path when he walked over, not hurting him in the slightest. Such a method shocked the ancient leaf fire dragon. He felt that there was something different about the person in front of him, but he couldn't put his finger on it. In the eyes of the ancient leaf fire dragon, Qin Yu was just someone who was slightly stronger than the others. If they were to be serious about it, his cultivation level was not that high. Suddenly, he thought of a problem. How did you get in? Moreover, he did it so openly. Did no one stop him? Me? Of course, I walked in openly. You want to know about the situation in the Fire God Palace, right? However, the current Palace Master, Vice Palace Master, and Alaozu are all dead. At least, they were all disbanded when I arrived. Now, there's no one else in the Fire God Palace other than me. Of course, he knew what that meant. Even if he was a dragon who didn't care about worldly affairs, he would definitely not overlook the bloodshed behind those few words. If it were anyone else, it would be fine. However, the Laozu of the Fire God Palace had already reached the Heavenly Palace realm. How could someone that even he had to pay attention to die so easily? I'm only asking you if you're going to submit or die. When the anciently fire dragon finished his sentence, Qin Yu was already standing next to the dragon head. The vast sea of fire was just like its name. However, such a vast sea of fire didn't hurt him at all. Even his clothes were still clean. As he walked, he floated gently. There wasn't a speck of dust on him. He didn't look like he had just returned from a victory. Instead, he looked more like he was taking a stroll in his own backyard. What did you say? You want me to submit to you? The anciently fire dragon couldn't believe what he had just heard. He admitted that Qin Yu was indeed strong. However, to make a proud dragon like him lower his head, in his opinion, That was simply impossible. No one had ever said such words to him. Even his relationship with the Fire God Palace was more of a cooperative relationship. He even vaguely felt like he was in the dominant position. Chinyu stared at the anciently fire dragon's eyes that were bigger than his head and said, I said, submit or die. These are the only two choices in front of you. As he spoke, Chinyu summoned the War Dragon Coil and released the majestic dragon might of the War Dragon Immortal King to suppress the anciently fire dragon. Did you really destroy the Fire God Palace? The man and dragon stared at each other for a while. In the end, the anciently fire dragon was the first to admit defeat. He really wanted to know what was going on outside. If you don't believe me, come out and take a look. Chinyu chuckled. However, to prevent the anciently fire dragon from running away, Su-Imo tied him up with a rope. Even a dragon would have a hard time escaping from a specially made rope. The anciently fire dragon felt humiliated by the rope. He struggled with all his might and refused to give in no matter what. Chinyu didn't persuade him. You don't agree? Fine, I'll beat you until you agree. When he finally came out, the anciently fire dragon had some fresh wounds on his body. However, none of these could compare to the shock he felt when he saw the scene outside. Everywhere was a mess. There wasn't much blood and corpses because Chinyu wasn't someone who killed indiscriminately. However, he had destroyed almost all the buildings on the surface of the Fire God Palace, whether it was the barrier or the huge building erected on the ground. All that was left was a few broken tiles and walls. There were still some remnants of the ancestor golem's aura on the ground. Sensing the aura, the anciently fire dragon keenly sensed that the aura contained an extremely powerful aura of his own kind. It was similar to Chinyu's aura. A wise man submits to circumstances. In the end, he chose to submit. He also saw other dragons who had submitted to Chinyu. Of course, his strength could be considered one of the best. However, after experiencing the ups and downs, he didn't regret his decision at all. He chose to submit and was even glad that he had made the wisest choice. The submitted anciently fire dragon contributed his blood essence. Chinyu devoured it and meditated on the spot to completely fuse it. This time, there wasn't a single flaw. Everything was done naturally. As a result, the dragon's soul also benefited greatly. Chapter 803. However, he was still lacking a little. Chinyu opened his eyes. He could feel that he was stuck at the edge of the mastery, quintessential saint realm. With just a little bit more external help, he would be able to break through completely. Master, why don't you try to refine all the fire in the vast sea of fire? It also contains an extremely powerful energy. The anciently fire dragon who had submitted to Qin, Yu quickly suggested. The vast sea of fire had been formed for a long time, and it contained the origin energy of the entire fire territory. It could even be said that the energy it contained was enormous. In addition to the fact that the anciently fire dragon had lived there for a long time, it was filled with dragon chi. Ordinary people would be burned by the raging fire if they took a step closer to it, let alone absorbing the energy within. However, it was not a threat to Chinyu. Instead, it was a help. The anciently fire dragon who had submitted to him spoke. Master, if you absorb the energy of the entire sea of fire, that little barrier will be nothing. It's just that the fire is violent. The fire attribute is one of the most violent energies in the universe. That sea of fire is not to be underestimated. The anciently fire dragon paused as he spoke. He recalled that when Chinyu had found him previously, he had been able to enter and exit the sea of fire freely. That's true. Chinyu was slightly taken aback. He then rushed into the sea of fire. To others, although the sea of fire was a vast sea of energy, they would not be able to use it for themselves. However, it was not a threat to Chinyu. On the contrary, it was a sea of resources that he could use as he wished. Once again, Chinyu entered the sea of fire and went straight to the deepest part. The vast sea of fire was almost boundless. In the middle of it was the origin energy of the entire fire territory. When he sat in the middle of the vast sea of fire, The temperature of the flames was so high that it could even burn the air. The entire space was filled with only scorching waves of fire. Unknowingly, the flames sensed the intrusion of an outsider and surrounded him. Not only did Yu not stop them, he even took the initiative to let them absorb the energy in the sea of fire. The dragon's soul rose into the air and wandered through the entire sea of flames, absorbing the energy that had been stored in the sea of flames for a long time. It was just that what he could absorb was ultimately a drop in the bucket. At this moment, a powerful suction force suddenly came from the depths of the vast sea of fire. All the heat in the sea of fire was drawn away by this powerful suction force, creating several vortexes made entirely of flames in the air. Dozens of vortexes sucked in at the same time, and in the shortest amount of time, all the flames in the sea of fire were plundered. At the end of the whirlpool, the condensed energy was connected into dozens of thin threads, all of which entered Yu's body. The last wisp of fiery red, purest energy also fused into Yu's body. Yu suddenly opened his eyes. A red light flashed in his eyes before they finally calmed down. The dragon's soul quickly returned and let loose a long roar as its aura became even more substantial. Yu's god soul was connected to the dragon's soul. As long as Yu was willing, he would naturally give a part of it to the dragon's soul while absorbing the enormous energy. Both of them would advance at the same time and reap great benefits. As soon as the long roar ended, the dragon's soul was already close to him. This is great. I've reached the mastery quintessential saint stage and am on the verge of a breakthrough. The dragon's soul was overjoyed. It could be said that it was only a step away. Yu smiled slightly. Although he could break through to the quintessential saint stage by deducting a part of the dragon soul's energy. However, that kind of breakthrough was not as good as solidifying his foundation now. Moreover, there were opportunities everywhere in the Ten Directions world. It did not matter if he kept a part of the energy for himself. At this moment, in the distant sea, a huge palace stood tall in the sea. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar was heard. What did you say? The palace master is dead? The sea had its own rules. All the important figures of the major sects would leave behind a life tablet. The life tablet was usually useless. However, once the owner who was connected to the life tablet died, it would shatter on its own. All the major and minor forces in the sea used this method to record the safety of those who went out. If there was only one crack, it would be a minor injury. If there were several cracks, it would be a serious injury. If it shattered, it would be death. Looking at the place where the stone tablet should have been in the box, there was only a pile of powder left. The deputy palace master's expression was rather unpleasant. He quickly took the box to report to the patriarch. The Sea God Palace's patriarch's expression was also unpleasant when he received the box. What's going on? I remember that he's already entered the Heaven Palace. He's not invincible in the world, but it's hard to find a match in the world. No matter what, he shouldn't be unable to use a life-saving technique. Investigate. We must investigate thoroughly. No matter what, the Sea God Palace can't take this lying down. In the end, they sacrificed several peerless treasures that were hard to find in the world. Finally, through the connection between the Life Tablet and the Sea God Palace's Palace Master, the scene before the Sea God Palace's Palace Master's death was replayed. Sensing the boundless and powerful aura, the Sea God Palace's Patriarch almost could not withstand the impact of the powerful aura. When he saw that a Heaven Sage had used a secret treasure to suppress 2 Heaven Palaces, the Patriarch could not believe it. How can there be such a powerful person in this world? How old is he? He's just a Heaven Sage. How can he go against the Heaven Palace? It seems that this child does have a treasure on him. Quickly go and find out what happened in the Fire Territory. The entire Sea God Palace was in an uproar. Whether it was the great Emperor's inheritance or the technique used to suppress the 2 Heaven Palaces, countless people were in awe. Yu vaguely sensed something and suddenly looked in the direction of the sea. It was as if he could see through the layers of spatial barriers and see the world covered by the sea. The once powerful fire god palace was destroyed in an instant. The remaining subordinates had all fled in a hurry. The once majestic fire god palace was now a ruin. It was forbidden to live. All the major forces rushed to spread the news. Qin Yu's name spread throughout the fire territory, and he was listed as a top enemy by all the major forces. However, just when everyone was nervous, Qin Yu had already turned and left. In the entire fire god palace, the only one that could catch his attention was the fire god palace. Just when everyone was worried about their own safety, a small number of forces that were on good terms with the fire god palace had already gathered their most powerful people. What should we do? Now that the fire god palace has fallen, we will become the target of everyone's crusade. What should we do now? However, they had never thought that they would end up like this because they had helped the tyrant. After Qin Yu left, all the forces that were on good terms with the fire god palace were destroyed in an instant. This was the result of everyone kicking a man who was down. After this incident, the fire territory would have a new master. The situation of the fire god palace being the dominant force would be a thing of the past. Chapter 804. Now that the anciently fire dragon was in his bag, it was time to settle the remaining matters. Although he was only at the quintessential saint realm, with all his trump cards, he could go against a heavenly palace realm expert. There's still a long way to go before I can return to my peak. Qin Yu was about to leave the fire region when he suddenly sensed a life aura not far away from him. Perhaps it was because he was carrying some treasure, but when he got closer, he realized that there was someone there. He wasn't the kind of person who liked to poke his nose into other people's business. Although he sensed that someone was there, he only paused for a moment and was about to leave. Luo Shan had been bullied by the people from the Fire God Palace all year round. Due to his ignorance when he was young, he had spoken the truth in front of everyone from the Fire God Palace. Since then, he had been hunted down. When those people couldn't find him, they chose to wipe out his entire family. It could be said that he hated the people from the Fire God Palace to the core. Now that the Fire God Palace had been wiped out, he wanted to see it happen the most. It was a pity that he couldn't do it himself. Benefactor, Luo Shan suddenly pounced over and knelt before Qin Yu. There were many people who hated the Fire God Palace to the core like him. Many of them had their entire family wiped out by the Fire God Palace. However, he had his own trump card to stand out from thousands of people. Although the young man in front of Qin Yu was skinny, his eyes were bright and clear. He could see through him at a glance. What's the matter? He had never seen this person before. His strength was just average. Not to mention in front of him, even in the entire fire region, he was at the bottom. Benefactor, when you wiped out the entire Fire God Palace, I was watching from the outside. I have an irreconcilable feud with them. None of them are innocent. I just want to be by your side to repay your kindness. No matter what, please let me do something for you. Nodding his head, he ignored the happiness in the young man's eyes. I don't keep useless people by my side. With my strength, what can you help me with? I don't even need you for my daily needs. Having said that, he continued to walk forward. This time, he really left the fire region and stepped into the void. He took a step forward and arrived at another world in the blink of an eye. However, at the last moment, Luo Shan grabbed Qin Yu's ankle even though he was riddled with wounds and followed him to this world. Carelessly wiping the blood off his face, Luo Shan didn't care about it at all. Previously, when he was hiding, there were many wounds like this. I've always had a secret. When Qin Yu was fighting the Fire God Palace's old ancestor and Sea God Palace's hallmaster, he was being bullied and interrogated by the people from the Fire God Palace. After that, Qin Yu overpowered the two Heavenly Palace realm cultivators, causing everyone to flee in panic. Only then was he able to survive. And the secret that he was being interrogated about was related to a secret spiritual land. Over the years, he had been hiding in many places. Furthermore, he was from the sea region. It was because he had treasures that he was able to escape from the sea region to the fire region. To be able to allow such a weak person to safely cross two large regions, such treasures were not bad, but Qin Yu didn't take it to heart. It shouldn't be just that. for the Fire God Palace to keep an eye on you. It can't be that simple. If it was just that, Luo Shan wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state. Moreover, you keep saying that you have a major discovery that made the people from the Fire God Palace keep an eye on you. Why is your strength still so low? Luo Shan was only at the Calamity Realm, and he was only at the initial stage. To be honest, it was already shocking that he was able to survive until now, let alone knowing a big secret that was related to the spiritual land. The spiritual land was not only rich in resources, but a natural spiritual land that was not controlled by anyone would have a huge amount of resources in it. It was obvious how coveted it was. Even the top forces in the fire region couldn't help but spend a lot of manpower and resources to search for it, even if it was just a clue. Thinking of his strength, Luo Shan looked a little depressed. When I was being hunted back then, I didn't manage to escape. However, those people didn't take my life. Instead, they stripped my martial vein. It wasn't hard to imagine how he could cultivate after his martial vein was stripped. Qin Yu thought highly of him. Luo Shan was indeed worthy of his respect for being able to survive until now after suffering so much. It was just that he was living in a sorry state. It was that treasure that gave me the opportunity to cultivate again. However, perhaps the fusion rate wasn't high enough. All these years, I had to endure great pain while cultivating. In the end, I was only at the strength that you saw. When facing those people, I didn't even have the strength to fight back. All I could do was to escape in a panic. After Luo Shan finished speaking, his 5 fingers suddenly formed a claw. A cold gleam flashed across his fingernails. Without frowning, Luo Shan stripped the martial vein from his body. To be more precise, it was a dragon vein. Dragon vein? Qin Yu couldn't help but be shocked. All the dragons that had submitted to him were attracted by the aura and became restless. Even the dragon's soul couldn't help but be attracted. It was only because of its strong self-control that it was able to avoid embarrassment in the end. How could it be that kind of supreme treasure? This is just a fake dragon vein. It only has an appearance and some basic functions of a dragon vein. To me, it can only be used as a martial vein to prevent myself from being reduced to an ordinary person. As he spoke, Luo Shan's aura became weaker and weaker. Not long after the fake dragon vein was stripped, his originally pitiful strength completely dissipated, and he became a complete ordinary person. Qin Yu didn't reject the fake dragon vein. Instead, he held it in his hand and felt it carefully. This thing is indeed not suitable for you, but it has another use for me. Now that I've left the fire domain, I could have picked 2 treasures for you in the fire god's treasury. He and the dragon soul had only used all the resources that could quickly increase their strength. Of course, this was also the most valuable part, accounting for almost 90% of the entire treasury. However, the remaining 10% had a lot of scattered things. If he went back to look for it, he might really be able to find something that Luo Shan could use. You're already thinking highly of me by accepting this thing. Since it shouldn't have been an opportunity that belonged to me in the first place, it's enough that I've forced it for so many years. Naturally, I should give it away. Luo Shan stood up with a smile and looked around. Reminiscence appeared in front of his eyes. This is the sea. Although I haven't been back for a long time, I think there shouldn't be any changes. Chapter 805. With someone who was familiar with the terrain leading the way, Qin Yu easily found the Poseidon Palace. After all, Luo Shan had given the pseudo-dragon vein to him. Even if he was willing to do so, he did not owe anyone anything. Luo Shan's enemy was not only the Fire God Palace, but also the Poseidon Palace that was in cahoots with the Fire God Palace. There's no hurry now. Let me bring you to the place where I found the dragon vein. Although it's just a pseudo-dragon vein, I think there should be some clues from the real dragon vein. The pseudo-dragon vein did not have many uses, but it contained a lot of energy. Especially to the dragon tribe, it was a great supplement. However, the real dragon vein was not only a great supplement, but it could also be planted. If he could obtain the real dragon vein, Qin Yu's dragon tribe would be able to increase their strength day by day. By then, his combat strength would be doubled again. I believe you won't lie to me. Why don't we deal with the Poseidon Palace first? Those who are in cahoots with the Fire God Palace are not good people. Thus, Qin Yu would naturally not be lenient in the slightest. When they walked to the door, a few people rushed out and questioned them what they were doing here. They didn't stop after seeing Luo Shan, but Luo Shan immediately recognized them. It's these two lackeys. They killed my infant brother and took it as a reward. Oh, Qin Yu looked at the two lackeys. He did not even need to take out any weapons. As long as he used his strength, he would be able to crush them into powder. The two of them were just ordinary. They were only in the later stages of the Calamity Realm and were just gatekeepers. Blood splattered everywhere. There were two more pools of blood and two fresh corpses in front of the Poseidon Palace's door. Soon, a person who looked like a manager came out. His strength was not bad, as he was in the early stages of the quintessential saint realm. The people he led were not weaklings like those in the Calamity Realm. The person who looked like a manager recognized Luo Shan. He narrowed his bean-sized eyes and asked, "Is the Mastery Quintessential Saint stage the reason you brought him here?" Luo Shan could not be bothered to talk to him. He had seen Qin Yu, who was in the Quintessential Saint realm, kill two people in the Heavenly Palace realm with his own eyes. Moreover, one of them was the Palace Master of the Sea God Palace. Perhaps it was the disdainful smile on Luo Shan's face, as well as the indifference of Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul that provoked the steward. Suddenly, he pulled out an azure-long saber from his waist. There were ripples on the saber. With a swing of the blade, the blue blade of light was clearly visible to the naked eye. However, in the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. Regardless of whether it was Qin Yu or the Dragon Soul, in the face of this sudden attack, their expressions did not change in the slightest. He didn't even move a finger. The blue blade of light disappeared without a trace. The manager was shocked. He knew that there was a gap of 2 minor levels between them. So he had taken out his trump card from the very beginning and used his full strength. He had originally wanted to stall for time, but this person was much stronger than he had imagined. Suddenly, he clenched his teeth, took out a cylindrical object from his waist, and threw it over his head. A dazzling rainbow light lit up the entire Sea God Palace. Countless people raised their heads. This was a rather urgent signal, representing that someone was knocking on the door. However, the rainbow light was not the highest level. Hence, not many people paid attention to it. Maybe it's quintessential sage realm or Empyrean realm or something like that. Sending a celestial deity realm over should be no problem. The Deputy Hall Master was busy with many things. The series of unforeseen events brought about by the Hall Master's sudden death left him in a terrible fix. How could he have the mind to care whether or not someone was knocking on the door? Moreover, looking at that color, one could tell that it was not an extremely urgent matter. If it was the most urgent matter, then what lit up would not be the rainbow light, but the red light. The steward looked at Qin Yu and the Dragon's Soul very vigilantly, but the latter merely watched with interest. That flickering rainbow light was not in a hurry to go over and interrupt it either. All of a sudden, a figure descended from the sky. When he landed, he even smashed a deep crater in the ground. Then he stood on his tiptoes and leaped lightly, jumping out of the deep crater. Such strength made the steward rather pleasantly surprised. When he recognized who on earth the newcomer was, he was even more completely relieved. "Senior Brother Lin, I didn't expect you to come personally. A late-stage heavenly god." Compared to the steward's joy, Qin Yu felt a little disappointed. Initially, he thought that a powerful figure would appear. Who knew that it was merely a late-stage heavenly god? If he had reached the heavenly ethereal realm, perhaps he would have to be more cautious. But now, it seemed like there was no need to use any trump cards. "Dragon Soul, are you interested in joining forces and fighting with your physical body? Let's see who wins first." The Dragon Soul was also interested after hearing that. Since they were going to fight with their physical bodies, they would not use any weapons or combat skills. They would be completely barehanded. His strength had increased one after another, and it just so happened that he needed a battle to consolidate it. Of course, I'm much weaker than you, but it's fine to use a celestial deity as a practice partner. As the person being discussed, senior brother Lin was naturally displeased. Although two late-stage heavenly saints might be powerful if they joined forces, one should know that he was a late-stage heavenly god. These words were simply disrespectful to him. It was as if he was just a mass of air standing there and posed no threat at all. Heavenly God halberd, heavenly water ripple. All of a sudden, he used all his weapons and combat skills in order to suppress the two of them at once. Yu muttered some words. He casually made a grabbing motion, clenched his fist tightly, and threw a punch. Although it was a physical fight and there were no other enhancements, this punch still caused the surrounding air to surge and crackle with crisp sounds. With a loud bang, senior brother Lin cried out in pain and fell to the ground. There was a purplish bruise on his right eye. Let me fix it for you from the side. The dragon's soul suddenly flashed over in the blink of an eye. Similarly, it did not use any energy and just punched out with the strength of its body. This time, even his left eye was complete. There was also a purplish bruise, one on the left and one on the right. It was symmetrical. Although senior brother Lin looked miserable, Yu and the dragon's soul had not killed him yet. Moreover, they did not use any other energy and just punched out casually. That was why he could still stand. The two of you are simply too much. At the same time, he could not help but be shocked. Where did these two people come from? How could they have such speed and strength? Although they looked like they were only late-stage heavenly saints, their strength was not much weaker than his. After all, he was only one step away from breaking through to the heavenly ethereal stage. No one answered him. Even the steward who was guarding at the back could not help but take 2 steps back when he met the dragon soul's gaze. Chapter 806. How could he, a mere quintessential saint, resist such power? Recalling that he had attacked without knowing the reason, he could not help but feel scared. Now he finally understood why Luo Shan would look at him with a mocking and pitying smile. It was because the two of them were not ordinary people. Although he did not know where they came from, their power could not be faked. Last hit, Yu did not show any mercy this time. He knocked out senior brother Lin, who was a late heavenly god, with one punch. As expected, his foundation was solid. It was not impossible for a quintessential saint to cross a realm. Moreover, he had not used any weapons or martial skills. If Yu had used his weapon and martial skill from the very beginning, then even a late-stage heavenly deity would definitely not be able to survive against him. In comparison, senior brother Lin had only fainted. He was already considered lucky. Another signal exploded. This time, it was not a dazzling rainbow. It was an orange color that was second only to red. Yu did not wait any longer. Previously, he wanted to watch the show. However, he realized that if he did not cause a huge commotion, he would not be able to force the truly powerful existence out of the Neptune Palace. Look carefully. Everyone who participated back then, as long as you point at them, they will die. Luo Shan was filled with endless gratitude. What did he do to deserve this? However, Yu did not want to owe anyone anything. He had destroyed the Fire God Palace because he wanted to. If he took someone else's things because of this, he would not feel at ease. In any case, there were many things in the Sea God's palace. However, in the end, not only did he obtain a pseudo-dragon's vein, but he also obtained all the resources in the Neptune Palace. The collection that he had accumulated for tens of thousands of years was worth it. Both he and the Dragon Soul had just increased their power. They needed some people to practice. If he could make use of this opportunity to break through to become a heavenly god, it would be even better. Luo Shan calmed himself down and began to search for familiar faces. He pointed out a few people from time to time. Just as his finger landed on those people, they all turned into blood mist in the blink of an eye and dissipated into nothingness. Not even a single bone was left behind. Apart from a few drops of blood, there was nothing that could prove that these people had once existed. Everyone standing outside the door couldn't help but run inside. They shouted for help as they ran, especially those who were pointed out by Luo Shan. They were running for their lives. However, in the end, they could not escape the fate of death. No matter what kind of strength they had, they all had to die. After fighting inside, Luo Shan had a deeper understanding of Qin Yu's strength. Even though he had seen it from afar, the distance wasn't very close, so he didn't feel that it was real. However, the blood on the ground was enough for him to recognize what kind of expert he was hugging. Who dares to be so impudent in my sea god palace? The vice palace master, Shui Yu, slowly walked out. The vice palace master of the sea god palace was a woman with a graceful figure and a peerless appearance. Following behind Shui Yu was a solemn and dignified man. The Chuan character between his eyebrows made him look slightly impatient. Two quintessential saint stage powerhouses are worth your effort. Shui Yu's frosty expression slowly melted and became as gentle as spring water. This is just a small matter. Perhaps there's something extraordinary about this person. In fact, our sea god palace wasn't like this in the past. Qin Yu finally understood. It seemed that there was something between the two of them. However, what was puzzling was that this man's strength was slightly weaker than Shui Yu's, but Shui Yu seemed to be obedient when facing him. However, no matter what identity this person had, since he had appeared in front of him, he could forget about showing off in front of him. I'm just here to seek justice for a friend of mine and take revenge. A debt of blood should be paid with blood. I'm just doing this kind of thing as usual. You'd better not interfere. Otherwise, I'll kill you too. Luo Shan couldn't help but want to retreat. Even when his strength was at its peak, he was only close to a heavenly venerate. Later on, when he obtained the pseudo-dragon vein, he was only at the early stage of the calamity stage. One could imagine how afraid he was when facing a heavenly ethereal stage powerhouse. However, when he suddenly saw Qin Yu and the dragon soul standing in front of him, his courage instantly rose. Even if two heavenly palace powerhouses joined forces, they would still die a quick death. However, it was only a half-step heavenly palace powerhouse. Have you forgotten what happened back then? Didn't you want to take the dragon vein in my hands? I'll tell you now. I've already given the thing to my benefactor. If you have the guts, come and take it. With someone backing him, Luo Shan was full of energy. He even dared to shout at someone whose strength was far higher than his. Hearing the two words dragon vein, no one could remain calm. When a man heard this, he glanced at Shui Yu. How come I didn't know that your sea god palace had discovered a dragon vein? Shui Yu's face stiffened. She cursed all 18 generations of Luo Shan's ancestors in her heart and quickly helped herself out of the situation. I didn't have time to tell you about this matter. Besides, there's something suspicious about that dragon vein. However, how could the man not understand what the sea god palace was thinking? In the end, he still didn't say anything. Hurry up and deal with these two people. Don't forget what your identity is now. You're just my favorite concubine. This is really a good show. The deputy palace master of the sea god palace is actually a favorite concubine of someone whose strength is not as good as hers. The man suddenly threw a glance at her and said in a cold tone, "What right do you have to say such things? Compared to me, the heavenly saint is nothing. Even if it's the heavenly oasis realm or even the heavenly palace realm, they still have to curry favor with me. Shui Yu is just one of my favorite concubines. With her strength, she can only be a favorite concubine." His tone was very arrogant. After that, Qin Yu learned that this man was called Di Xiaoyu. Since he dared to use the emperor as his surname, one could imagine that there was at least one great emperor behind Di Xiaoyu. Having just received the inheritance of a great emperor, Qin Yu himself was also a great emperor before he reincarnated. Of course, he knew the strength of a great emperor. However, no matter what kind of existence stood behind Di Xiaoyu, at least his own strength was somewhat weak. If he had to say something, it would be a disgrace to the name of a great emperor. Your surname is really too exaggerated. I think your ancestor will think that you are an unfilial descendant because your talent is really too poor. Before Di Xiaoyu got angry, Shui Yu had already started to make a move. She didn't want to see anything happen to Di Xiaoyu in her Sea God Palace. Moreover, the Sea God Palace was already on the verge of collapse. If she wanted to compete for the position of Palace Master, she would need Di Xiaoyu's help. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.